for increased investments in infrastructure and human capital development. Over the last 5 years, the Duterte administration has shown great political resolve in pursuing and delivering on this agenda of governance. To make a proper assessment of these reforms, we need to divide the term of this administration into two periods. The first is the period of growth, and the second is the period of pandemic response. We accomplished much in consolidating our economic growth during the first period of this administration. We grew at an average rate of 6.6%, making the Philippines among the fastest growing economies in Asia. The expectations have been met and the promises kept. We took an important step towards a lasting peace with the establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao. The administration likewise maintained a unrelenting campaign against criminality, breaking the back of organized crime, particularly those involved in the illicit drug trade. We saw the passage of the Ease of Doing Business Act and the National ID system that brings us closer to the goal of achieving e-governance. The rice tariffication law was finally achieved after more than 30 years of failed attempts under previous administration. The law opened up the Philippine rice market and in turn lowered the price of our country's staple for more than 100 million Filipinos who spend about a fifth of their total budget on rice alone. Today's Filipino consumer enjoys an average reduction of 8 pesos per kilo compared to the peak of rice prices in 2018. The consumers also have a wider variety of rice choices now. As a result, rice is no longer the main contributor to our overall inflation rate. In March 2021, rice contributed only 1/10 of 1% percentage point to the inflation versus its 1 percentage point share at the height of the 2018 inflation spike. Without this law, we would have experienced even higher inflation rates and seasonal rice shortages. The law ensures that farmers benefit directly from import tariffs by providing at least 10 billion pesos each year for mechanization, high-quality seeds, access to credits, and training. Since the law's effectivity, the Bureau of Customs has collected a total of 31.9 billion pesos in rice import tariffs, which is funding the modernization of our agricultural sector. We also successfully enacted bold tax reform measures. We are the first administration in Philippine history to have embarked on a tax reform without being forced to do so by an external party or a looming economic crisis. I would like to point out, however, that the success of the tax reform measures cannot be attributed exclusively to current efforts. In fact, this is a logical continuation of the decades of reforms arduously passed by previous administration. The train law, or the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion, is a significant achievement of this administration. It provided a robust and recurrent revenue flow that expanded social services and supported our massive economic investments in modern infrastructure. Train reduced personal income taxes for 99% of our taxpayers, giving them much needed relief after 20 years of non-adjustment. Through Train, we have basically given out a 14-month pay every year to our wage earners. Under the law, we imposed excise taxes on sweetened drinks, from which we collect almost 100 million pesos a day. Train likewise mandated the implementation of our first ever nationwide fuel marking program to curb oil smuggling. All in all, Train enabled the government to raise 305 billion pesos in incremental revenues during the first 3 years of implementation. The Duterte government is the only administration in Philippine history that increased excise taxes on sin products 3 times within one presidential term. The excise taxes on tobacco and alcohol products improved funding for the Universal Healthcare Program, which is another landmark reform of this administration. Since 2016, we have been collecting an average of 200 billion pesos annually in excise taxes from cigarettes and alcoholic products. This is more than double the average annual collection of the past administration. On top of this, the Duterte administration also cleaned up the domestic cigarette business. We penalized a domestic cigarette manufacturer for tax evasion in 2017. This resulted in the biggest tax settlement in Philippine history, amounting to 30 billion pesos. The shareholders of those companies are out of the cigarette business. Since then, our collection on cigarette excise taxes increased by an average of 2.5 billion pesos per month. In addition to modernizing our tax policies, the Duterte administration aggressively pushed for the full digitalization of the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Bureau of Customs. This effort enhanced the collection efficiency of these agencies. For instance, in 2015, only 25% of taxpayers used the Bureau's electronic filing and payment system. In 2019, taxpayers who availed of the electronic channel more than doubled. Our policy of instilling fiscal discipline among our GOCCs, or government-owned or controlled corporations, allowed us to collect an average of 57 billion pesos annually from these firms since we took office. This is more than double the average annual collection of the past administration. Through bold tax reforms and better tax administration, we were able to raise our revenue effort to 16.1% of GDP in 2019 from 15.1% in 2015. This was our best performance in more than 2 decades. In 2019, our debt to GDP ratio was at a historic low of 39.6% from 42.7% in 2015. We had won the highest credit ratings ever. As a result, we were able to bring down our borrowing costs and raise bond issuances with very tight spreads in the international markets. The ratio of our debt interest payments to revenue significantly declined to only 11.5% in 2019 from 14.7% in 2015. Likewise, the ratio of interest payments to expenditure dropped to 9.5% in 2019 from 13.9% before we assumed office. This means that more of our fiscal resources are being funneled towards meaningful and productive spending rather than debt servicing. This also indicates that our additional debt is being beneficial to our development agenda rather than being a burden to growth. A perfect example of our productive spending is the Build, Build, Build program. This is the President's main strategy to help lift Filipinos out of poverty. The Philippines underinvested in infrastructure for far too long. The previous 4 administrations spent only about 2% of GDP on infrastructure investments. This anemic performance led to problems in congestion and inefficiency in our ports, airports, bridges, and roads. With priorities rebalanced under President Duterte's watch, infrastructure spending dramatically rose to an average of 5% of GDP. Our fiscal discipline likewise encouraged our development partners to support our infrastructure program through concessional loans and grants. Since we took office, we sealed 22 highly concessional loan agreements for our flagship infrastructure projects. This includes the country's most ambitious infrastructure undertaking, the Metro Manila Subway Project. Apart from infrastructure, the Duterte administration also invested heavily in social services to boost human capital development. We provided healthcare coverage, housing, unconditional cash transfers, and free education at state and colleges and universities. With these game-changing reforms, we entered 2020 with the prospects of becoming an upper middle income country. We achieved the remarkable feat of bringing down the poverty rate to just 16.7% in 2018 from 23.5% in 2015. In just 4 years, 6 million Filipinos were lifted out of poverty. The unemployment rate also dropped to a low of 4.5% by the end of 2019 from 6.3% in 2015. Clearly, we had realized better economic and social outcomes for the Filipino people. And then COVID-19 came. And this once-in-a-century pandemic disrupted everything. Although the global health crisis was both unexpected and unfamiliar, the Duterte administration moved quickly to protect Filipino lives. For nearly the whole of 2020, the government had to impose strict restrictions on movement to keep our people safe from the virus while building up our health system capacity. We were fully aware, however, that this would impose heavy costs on the government, on the economy, and on our people. Nonetheless, the game-changing reforms we had institutionalized over the last 5 years cemented our overall macroeconomic stability and allowed us to respond decisively to this health crisis. We owe this in large part to our legislators who passed our reform measures on time. The Philippines' direct response to the crisis so far amounted to 2.76 trillion pesos, equivalent to 15.4% of our GDP. Our first priority was to mitigate widespread hunger among the population when we had to lock down the economy. The administration worked closely with Congress to pass stimulus measures that allowed us to respond to the pandemic quickly and effectively, but within our means. Bayanihan 1 enabled us to respond responsibly, support our vulnerable sectors. So the Social Amelioration Program assisted 18 million families, and the Small Business Wage Subsidy Program kept more than 3 million Filipino workers afloat. These emergency subsidies amounted to about 250 billion pesos, the largest social protection program in Philippine history. We also expanded medical resources to fight COVID-19 and ensure the safety of our frontliners. Fiscal and monetary actions were undertaken to keep the economy afloat and support recovery initiatives. After ensuring primary safety nets in the emergency stage, Bayanihan 2 was introduced. Through this measure, we were able to strengthen the health sector, provide cash for work programs, and assist affected sectors. Instead of throwing money at the crisis, the government adopted the more prudent strategy of expanding lending to pandemic-hit enterprises. Our main government banks were infused with capital for them to lend more money to the productive sectors of the economy. Funding the social protection and economic stimulus measures was a challenge. Fortunately, we have ample borrowing capacity to absorb the large financial shock. Our historic low debt ratio allowed a temporary but controlled expansion of our deficit to GDP ratio to 7.6% last year. We had set out a clear strategy for financing our deficit. We prioritized domestic borrowings, followed by official development assistance and the international capital markets at the end. We determined this plan as the most prudent approach, ensuring sustainability of our debt service. Because of all the unplanned spending for COVID-19 response and the drop in revenues due to our lockdowns, our debt to GDP ratio rose to 54.5% today. Nonetheless, this 15 percentage point increase in our debt level keeps us well within the prescribed bounds of fiscal viability and the experience of our rating peers. The fact that the Philippines was able to maintain its historic high credit ratings throughout the crisis is another notable achievement of this administration. Even with the ongoing pandemic, we managed to stick to our socio-economic agenda. We finally passed CREATE, or the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, which makes our comprehensive tax reform program nearly complete. CREATE is the largest fiscal stimulus for businesses in our recent history. It is estimated to provide private enterprises more than 1 trillion pesos worth of tax relief over the next 10 years. MSMEs will be the biggest beneficiaries of CREATE through the grant of the largest ever corporate income tax rate reduction in the country, from 30% to 20%. The law introduces an enhanced incentives package that is performance-based, time-bound, targeted, and transparent. Apart from CREATE, President Duterte also enacted FIST, or the Financial Institutions Strategic Transfer Act. This allows banks to efficiently offload their bad loans and non-performing assets. This bill is an improved version of the SPV, or Special Purpose Vehicle Law, in 2003. The big difference is that FIST was enacted within the first year of the pandemic, while the SPV was signed into law 5 long years after the Asian financial crisis struck in 1997. Amid the extraordinary challenge we continue to face, we will not waver in our commitment to ensure that our macroeconomic fundamentals remain strong. We want to make sure that we can face the future with a deep war chest. We will continue to demonstrate our firm resolve of maintaining fiscal prudence while revitalizing the economy. We believe that our economic recovery should be patterned after the growth policies our administration put forward from the beginning of our term. Hence, we are maintaining the pace of our Build, Build, Build program. Even with the ongoing crisis, we have kept our budget for infrastructure investments, and it is programmed to increase to more than 5% of our GDP until the end of this administration's term. With this high multiplier effect, we are expecting the Build, Build, Build program to be the main driver of rebuilding the domestic economy. Despite supply challenges worldwide, we are fully rolling out our vaccination program. This will allow us to safely reopen more of our economy and restore jobs and incomes of our people. The target is to inoculate at least 70 million Filipinos, or 100% of our adult population, within the year. We have arranged for the delivery of more than 140 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines for this year. About 15% will be delivered in the first half of this year and 85% in the second half. More of the financing needed for the vaccination program was sourced through loans from the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We chose this financing strategy because we want to assure the public of 2 things. First, that the vaccines we are buying are internationally accepted and have passed the stringent criteria for safety and effectiveness. Second, that the vaccine procurement is totally transparent. This year, we will push for the passage of the Guide Bill, or the Government Financial Institutions Unified Initiatives to Distressed Enterprises for Economic Recovery. We also look forward to the approval of the remaining tax reform packages. Package 3 will make our property valuation system at par with international standards. Package 4 aims to simplify the taxation of passive income and financial services and transactions. To fully liberalize the Philippine economy, we will continue to push for the amendments to the Foreign Investments Act, the Public Service Act, and the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. The Philippines has certified these 3 bills as urgent. The move will help us speed up approval of these measures within the President's term. We will also continue the ongoing digital reforms in our revenue agencies to ensure that they match the efficiencies of the best comparable institutions worldwide. To raise more funds for economic recovery, we are proposing to increase the mandated dividend remittances of GOCCs to the National Treasury from the current 50% to at least 75% of their net earnings. The Duterte administration is also committed to continuously build a truly broad-based and inclusive financial system fit for the 21st century. We will push for the passage of a bill that will further deepen the domestic capital markets by building a sustainable corporate pension system. We are also supporting reforms to save the MUP, or military and uniformed personnel pension, by making it fiscally sustainable for the long term. Even with the pandemic ongoing, the Duterte administration acknowledges the urgency of putting forward stronger climate adaptation and mitigation measures. In the coming period, the government will be working intensely with the Congress and local governments to achieve its commitments to the Paris Agreement. On April 15, the Philippines submitted its first ambitious NDC, or Nationally Determined Contribution to the global effort to fight climate change. We target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 75% before 2030. This ambitious target was set to challenge both ourselves as well as the rest of the world. We have a unique opportunity in Mindanao to demonstrate our commitments. We are exploring the financing mechanism to enable the government to improve the generating capacity of the Agus Pulangi hydropower plant and acquire coal-fired power plants in the region to repurpose them as we increase capacity of renewable energy. This will shift most of our energy requirements in Mindanao to hydropower. Eventually, it will spur investments from companies seeking to expand their operations in areas powered by clean energy. We are also pushing for the passage of a bill that would ban single-use plastics. This will allow every Filipino to do his or her part on a daily basis in helping save the world's environment. We hope for Congress' timely passage of this important piece of legislation. We are fully determined to restore the vigor of the Philippine economy at the soonest possible time. Even with the unprecedented crisis, the Duterte administration will continue to work hard until the last minute of its term to undertake the remaining reforms we had set out to do in our 0 to 10-point socioeconomic agenda. Philippine economy, we will stay true to our promise of real change. We will make sure that the programs we have pursued will be irreversible and form the foundation of an inclusive, sustainable, and investment-driven economy for the Filipino people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very inspiring welcome message, Secretary Dominguez, and good morning again, everyone. I am Finance Assistant Secretary and Spokesperson Paula Alvarez, and I will be your host for today. So now, we will move on to the first plenary session with NEDA, BSP, and DBM chiefs to provide us with updates on the Philippine macroeconomic development. At this juncture, may we call on Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua to give us updates on the administration's 0 to 10-point socioeconomic agenda and the priorities for 2021 to 2022.
Thank you very much, Sec Paula. Good morning to everyone. My presentation today will be to zero in on this 0 to 10-point socio-economic agenda, giving you the story of Philippine development in the last 5 years. The Philippine development story started with this vision. By 2022, we would have reduced the poverty rate from 21.6% of the population to 14%. That means lifting 6 million Filipinos out of poverty. And we would have graduated to upper middle income country status with a gross national income of close to $4,000 per person per year, which will make us rather in the same league of countries like Thailand or China today. And by 2040, we would have eradicated extreme poverty, where no one goes to bed hungry, and graduate to become a high-income country where Japan and South Korea are today. After only 3 years of the administration, the data came out to show that we have actually achieved the promise of lifting 6 million Filipinos out of poverty. The revised statistics show that in 2015, the poverty incidence was 23.5% of the population, living below 60 pesos per person per day. That was the poverty line. In 2018, the poverty incidence improved to 16.7%, by far the biggest improve in our history in a 3-year period, thereby lifting 6 million Filipinos out of poverty. And we continue to target 14% or lower by the end of the administration. The reason for this important achievement is that we have had significant progress in our 0 to 10-point social economic agenda. The ones that you see in green have substantial achievement, and we are working hard to deliver those that remain in the 0 to 10-point social economic agenda. And I will explain the details in a while. All of these have resulted in significant gains for the economy and the people. Without doubt, COVID-19 is going to make our recovery challenging, but we have the solid fundamentals to address our ongoing challenges. We have one of the highest growth prior to COVID, averaging 6.6% between 2016 and 2019. Before COVID, we were likely to become an upper middle income country in 2020, or 2 years ahead of our target schedule of 2022. We achieved low and stable inflation. The average is exactly 3%, enabled partly by the rice tariffication law. We have one of the strongest fiscal position prior to COVID, the highest revenue to GDP ratio, and the lowest debt to GDP ratio, largely enabled by the tax reform and our fiscal prudence. We achieved one of the highest infrastructure spending in history. We achieved also the highest ever credit rating in the range of BBB plus to A minus. And as a result, the people benefited. We saw the lowest level of unemployment and underemployment prior to COVID. And as I mentioned, the lowest poverty incidence in our history. Let me now go through the details of the 0 to 10-point socio-economic agenda, focusing on some of the key accomplishments. The first is constraints to doing business have shifted dramatically from macroeconomic concerns to pandemic. In 2005, the World Bank did a survey and asked investors what were the severe constraints to doing business in the Philippines. Number 1 was macroeconomic instability. Number 2, corruption. Number 3, electricity. Many years later, 15 years later, we have addressed very much macroeconomic instability. Our concerns right now are more structural and more on sustainability. And one of the important indicator of this is our improving credit rating, which have gone up from as low as BB minus 10, 20 years ago to BBB plus. And this credit rating upgrade is not just about borrowing on cheaper terms. It means upgrading everyone's lives. Everyone who borrows for a housing loan, an auto loan, a personal loan, even credit card loans. And this means everyone has the opportunity to invest and to save. Our second progress is on tax reform. And our tax reform is not about raising revenues per se. It is about investing in our country's future. Because of a series of tax reform that we have done in the last 5 years, we have seen one of the highest tax to GDP and revenue to GDP ratio since 1997. And this is our insurance as we entered the unexpected COVID-19 pandemic. And some of the highlights of our tax reform are the landmark passage of the train law in 2017, which reduces personal income tax and also broadens the tax base. We also passed the tax amnesty that covers estate tax and delinquency tax. We also passed two important excise tax reform, the tobacco excise as well as the alcohol and e-cigarette excise taxes, which are largely funding our universal healthcare and helping people fund their expenses in this time of pandemic. We also passed the landmark CREATE bill, which reduces corporate income tax from 30 to as low as 20% to benefit even the smallest or the micro corporations. We have finally made, after more than 30 years, a performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent fiscal incentives regime. We expect this to help in our pandemic recovery by allowing us to create at least 400,000 jobs over the next few years and to support 90,000 micro, small, and medium corporations. And we improve the governance by expanding the role of the Fiscal Incentives Review Board. On the ease of doing business, the ease of doing business law passed several years ago have allowed us to reduce the processing time when people apply for licenses. It puts a maximum processing days, for instance, of 3 days for simple applications and up to 45 days for applications that require approval of any sanggunian. And this important reform have resulted in one of the biggest gain in our doing business indicator. In 2019, we ranked 124th out of 190 countries. By 2020, the latest survey, we have seen a 29-notch improvement to 95th place, and we will continue to do better to achieve a lower and more competitive ranking. Number 4 is infrastructure spending. From less than 100 billion peso when we started this century, we have ramped up infrastructure spending to over 1 trillion peso in 2019. And we continue to catch up in 2021 with the highest ever infrastructure spending of 1.17 trillion peso. And we will continue to do so until we complete the promises in the Build, Build, Build program. Of course, in 2020, the pandemic and our reprioritization has only temporarily reduced our infrastructure spending. But we continue to catch up starting this year. The most important indicator is not the amount spent, but the number of jobs created. The full-time equivalent of jobs is expected to reach 1.7 million full-time equivalent jobs in 2021 because of the infrastructure program. And this is much bigger than less than 1 million and as low as 100,000 10 or 20 years back. On number 5, on rural development, one of our landmark reform is a rice tarification law. It has benefited farmers through the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund with an annual guarantee of 10 billion pesos more for the next 6 years, plus any excess revenue from the tariff on rice. And the result as of last year has been very encouraging. The RCEP achievements in the past 2 years include the distribution of millions of inbred seeds of higher yield, of farm machineries, and also a significant amount of budget that is targeted to help farmers become productive. Before RCEP, the yield was 3.6 metric tons per hectare. With RCEP, the estimated yield is now 4.0 metric ton per hectare, or an additional income of 7,000 pesos per hectare. And this is also seen in official statistics. Prior to the series of typhoons and flooding last year, in the third quarter, rice production was 3.5 million metric ton, or a 15.2% growth, one of the highest growth that we have seen in our history. Number 7 is on human capital development. And the primary reform here is the universal healthcare law, which is allowing us right now to help people fund or finance their pandemic health needs. When the reform is fully implemented, we would see an increase in the primary care drugs available for free from 18 to 120. the health conditions that are covered from 7 to unlimited, and also to reduce the out-of-pocket pay from as high as 90% to a fixed fee, which is basically the membership. On number 8, science and innovation, we have 4 important achievements. The first is the Philippine Innovation Act, which we intend to maximize to allow us to sustainably become an upper middle income country, because innovation is what drives upper middle income countries' growth, and to help us prepare for high income country status. So instead of using someone else's ideas and we just assemble the product, our objective moving forward is to create those ideas through research and development within the Philippines. And the CREATE law will allow us also to incentivize the industries that will bring us to the future. Number 2 is our 90-notch improvement in the Global Innovation Index from 73rd rank to 54th rank in the latest survey as of 2018. We have also established the Philippine Space Agency, and we have launched the largest satellite tracking antenna, or PEDRO, in 2020. And the House has approved the creation of our own Virology Institute, and we hope that this will become law very soon. On number 9, on social protection, the key reform here is the national ID, and we will use this to improve the services and improve our targeting of support to all Filipinos. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have adopted a 3-step registration process to comply with the minimum health standard. Step 1 started in October 2020, and Step 2 started in January 2021. Under Step 1 is the house-to-house or online collection of demographic data and the setting of an appointment schedule. By April 30, we will be launching the online system where Filipinos with access to a mobile or a laptop or a computer can register themselves and their family. Once registered in Step 1, or the collection of demographic data, we proceed to Step 2, which is the visit to one of the fixed registration centers available in all provinces, where your biometrics will be captured and you will be able to open a bank account if you do not have a bank account. And the Step 3, which we will begin starting May 2021, is the issuance and delivery of the national ID card to those who successfully registered. From 0 registration a year ago, we are now seeing 30 million Filipinos registered to Step 1 of the national ID as of April 17. So 30.7 million Filipinos have already been registered. And this is 104.6% of our April 30, 2021 target. In other words, we have achieved or exceeded our target by 4.6%. And we will continue to do so in the safest possible manner, visiting the low-income households to collect this data, instead of having them go to the registration center and fall in line. We are also advancing our Step 2 registration. And as of April 17, we have already registered 4.4 million to Step 2. Step 2 is slower because people have to go to the registration center, fall in line. But because they have already given their demographics, it is not a long wait. They will be giving their fingerprint and iris scan and also a photograph. And as of April 17, we are 117.7% of our target. In other words, we are also advanced. We are also doing this in a very calibrated, gradual, and safe approach so that we will not be spreading the virus in the registration center. An important achievement of this Step 2 is that 42% of those who registered opened a bank account with the Land Bank. Of the 4.4 million registrants of Step 2, 1.859 million opened a bank account. And our target by the end of the year is for every family, there must be one bank account. There are 3 important priority use cases for the Philippine Identification System, or the National ID. The first is financial inclusion. Every time a Filipino registers for step 2 in the registration center, there is a land bank desk where the person can automatically open a bank account on the spot. And our target is that all families will have a bank account by the end of 2021. The second is our support to the COVID-19 vaccination distribution, where the registry can be used for the general population or the priority C group when they register. That data can be used for their queue in the general queue of the vaccine distribution. And finally, to have a more targeted way of giving social protection subsidies, such as the present social amelioration program, so that the amount goes directly to the bank account and minimize leakages and mistargeting. The priorities in the final year of the administration are as follows. We are working closely with Congress to enact 12 important measures by June of 2021. The Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, or LEDAC-EXECOM, has agreed on a common legislative agenda. And of that long list, there are 12 priority measures targeted to be passed by June 2021 or before the adjournment of this session. The first one is a passage of the guide bill. That is the one you see in red, which will allow us to help more small businesses and large businesses through liquidity or equity support. The second set is a series of tax and fiscal measures that are colored blue, beginning with the Package 3 of the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program or the Valuation Reform Act, and Package 4 or the Passive Income and Financial Intermediary Taxation or PFITA. Then the next three are the opening of the economy, such as the amendments of the Public Service Act, the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and Foreign Investment Act. All of these intend to increase our foreign direct investment so that we can attract the best technology, capital, and innovation to complement the skills of Filipino and create more and better jobs. Number 7 is the Rural Agriculture and Fisheries Development Financing System, or the amendment to the Agri-Agro Law, to also help our farmers compete better. Number 8 and 9, the one colored in yellow, are our support to the healthcare system to improve the foundation to prepare better for future pandemics, including the creation of a Medical Reserves Corps and the creation of the Disease Prevention and Control Authority Act. And finally, we also have a series of fiscal and tax measures to also help fund our recovery, including the ones on POGO, on online cockpits, and also strengthening LGUs in the use of their ERA. So these are the priorities by June 2021. Finally, let me talk about the prospects of our recovery. Our recovery is slated starting this year, and we would achieve pre-pandemic level in 2022, middle of 2022. And all of these are needed to prevent long-term scarring and productivity losses. The Development Budget and Coordination Committee has approved a 6.5 to 7.5% growth this year and up to 10% growth in 2022. Although the recent imposition of ECQ and MECQ may lower our growth estimate, but we are still early in the year and there is ample opportunity to catch up. And the enablers of our recovery are along 3 pillars. The first is the safe reopening of the economy once the spike is over, managing the risk better instead of having everyone put in quarantine when we can target the areas of highest risk. The second one is the timely implementation of our recovery package. And the third one is the timely implementation of our vaccination program. On the first, the reality today is the virus is not going to go away easily. And globally, we have seen a second, third, or fourth spike, and we will have to live with this virus. That is why we all have to work together to adhere to the public health standards. This is the only way for us to gradually and safely open the economy. If every Filipino will cooperate and practice the minimum health standard of washing hands, wearing a mask when going out and a face shield, staying at home unless to work or to buy essential goods and services, and even wearing a mask at home if you have family members who are older or with comorbidities. 95% of our success lie in your personal behavior. The second one, this will allow us, therefore, to open the economy safely and gradually. The second one is to implement fully and even accelerate our package of recovery programs, including Bayanihan 2, which continues to be implementable until middle of the year, the CREATE law on the lowering of taxes and the granting of more performance-based and targeted incentives, the implementation of the FIS, which addresses liquidity problems of firms, the immediate passage of GUIDE, which will address solvency problems of firms, the acceleration of our Build program, and the implementation of our 2021 budget. All of this together with our recovery and emergency programs in 2020 amounts to some 15.4% of GDP in both fiscal, monetary, and financial support. And finally is the acceleration of our vaccine deployment program, which we very much hope supply will come soon so that we can continue to vaccinate the critical sectors of our society. These are the achievements in the first 5 years of the administration and our program of priority for the remaining year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua. So now, may we have the presentation of Governor Benjamin Jokno from the Central Bank of the Philippines.
Thank you, Paula. To the members of the business community, diplomatic corps, academe, civil society, media, and fellow workers in government, a pleasant day to all of you. As the Philippines continues its battle against COVID-19, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas remains one with the government and the entire Filipino people in dealing with this crisis head-on and in pushing the economy toward full recovery. As we move toward the tail end of the crisis, much work remains to be done to restore jobs, renew confidence, and bring back the country to a robust growth path. The BSP has done quite a lot to manage the impact of COVID-19 on livelihoods and the economy, and we stand ready to do more if needed. Now, my presentation will be divided into 3 parts. First, the BSP's mandate and our COVID-19 response measures in line with our responsibilities. Second, updates on inflation, external accounts, and the banking system. 3 areas under the BSP's watch. And third, the vision of a post-COVID new economy. The BSP's primary responsibilities are to maintain price and financial stability and to promote an efficient payments and settlement system. These are necessary for maintaining a sound macroeconomic environment. The COVID-19 pandemic is primarily a health crisis, but the measures to contain it have significant economic and financial impact. The extent of the pandemic's impact has forced central banks globally to implement measures to ensure sufficient liquidity, restore market confidence, ease financial market stress, and support economic activity. Central banks need to do so while staying committed to their mandate. The Philippines entered the pandemic from a position of strength, made possible by our long history of critical structural reforms. We had a fiscal and monetary space to address the challenges from the pandemic without going into a debt problem, nor causing long-term damage to our economic fundamentals. The regulatory reforms over the past 20 years have made the Philippine banking system resilient to shocks. Banks are adequately capitalized and have low exposure to bad debts. They can support the economy, including micro, small, and medium enterprises, through credit and other financial services. But in view of the huge economic impact of the pandemic, BSP needed to provide regulatory relief measures to help banks navigate the crisis. The favorable inflation outlook and well-anchored inflation expectations allowed us to inject money into the economy without fear of causing unmanageable spike in consumer prices. There was enough room to ease monetary policy in support of the economy with the latest policy rate at 2%, even after a series of rate cuts last year. Since the onset of the pandemic, the BSP has infused over 2 trillion pesos, or approximately $43 billion in liquidity to the financial system. That is equivalent to 11% of the economy's GDP. The BSP's COVID response measures fell under three categories. First were measures to boost market confidence on availability of credit resources, such as cuts in the policy rate and the reserve requirement. Lower policy rate was meant to influence banks to slash their own lending rates, thereby promote credit-taking activities. The lower reserve requirement, or the proportion of deposits banks must keep as reserves in the BSP, increase the volume of loanable funds. Now, second were extraordinary liquidity measures. These include provisional advances to the national government to help fund COVID response measures. After previous ones were settled, the latest loan from the BSP was the 540 billion pesos granted last January. The loan has been extended following its original maturity dated end March. Another extraordinary liquidity measure is the BSP's purchases of government securities in the secondary market, which help financial markets run smoothly despite the crisis. Third were regulatory and operational relief measures to maintain stability of the financial system and ensure public access to financial services. We counted loans to micro, small, and medium enterprises as compliance to the reserve requirement, increased the single borrower's limit, or the limit on loans a bank may extend to a single borrower, and raised the ceiling for real estate loans. We excluded some loans from the past due and non-performing classification and allowed grace period for loan settlement and restructuring of rediscounted loans. Such moves provided relief to banks and their borrowers. The BSP's interventions help calm the market and ease domestic liquidity conditions. CDS declined from the levels during the hard lockdown in the second quarter last year, reflecting return of market confidence on the country's ability to service debts. The peso remains relatively strong. Its performance is broadly in line with the country's economic fundamentals. Now let's move on to the latest updates on inflation, external accounts, and banking system. Our latest estimates show that inflation will average at 4.2% this year, slightly above the 2 to 4% target range. This is due to supply-side pressures, including the impact of the African swine fever on supply of meat products and the increase in international oil prices. The slightly above target inflation will be transitory, as we see consumer prices falling back to 2.8% next year. But the BSP remains on the lookout for emerging second-round effects from supply-side inflation to determine whether a calibrated response to safeguard the public's inflation expectations will be warranted. With a favorable inflation outlook for next year, the Monetary Board maintained the policy rates during its meeting last 25 March 2021. We recognize that the economy is still in its nascent recovery phase. The accommodative monetary policy settings provide significant stimulus to demand and should be allowed to continue to work their way through the economy to boost recovery in private consumption and investment. The country's external accounts remain healthy and provide buffers against external shocks. The gross international reserves stood at $110 billion at the end of 2020, providing about 12 months worth of import cover. The received doctrine is that gross international reserves providing 3 months worth of imports is sufficient. The gross international reserves is more than the country's external debt of $98.5 billion. Now, given the impact of the pandemic on the people's and businesses' capacity to pay loans, many are curious about the health of banks in the country. Well, the banking system, although not unscathed, has kept the impact of the COVID-19 crisis manageable. They entered the pandemic with sufficient buffers. In addition, the BSP's regulatory relief measures have helped keep their balance sheets healthy and their ability to lend intact. Key performance indicators remain sound. Banks have more than enough liquidity to cover short-term liabilities, with a liquidity coverage ratio of universal and commercial banks at 197% as of December 2020. Banks are adequately capitalized, with its capital adequacy ratio of universal commercial banks at 16.8% on solo basis and 17.2% on consolidated basis as of September 2020. These are higher than the BSP's regulatory requirements of 10% and the internationally prescribed 8%. Banks' bad debts remain manageable and far from levels seen in the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis. Non-performing loans ratio of UKB, so Universal Commercial Banks, stood at 3.6% as of February 2020. Compare that to the 17.4% as an aftermath of the Asian financial crisis. Now, speaking of bad assets, the Financial Inclusion Strategic Transfer Bill was signed into law last February. This allows banks to dispose of their bad assets via asset management companies. And we estimate that the law can help cut NPL ratio of banks by 0.63 to 0.71 percentage points. Moving on to the final part of this speech, which is the vision of a new economy, one that is stronger, digitalized, and more inclusive. The BSP is one with the government in pursuing not only recovery, but a future for the Philippines that is much better than its pre-COVID state. Prior to the pandemic, we posted significant strides on poverty reduction and was on the verge of becoming an upper middle income economy. We intend to go back to that trajectory despite the COVID-19 crisis. The BSP is at the forefront of efforts to digitalize the Philippine economy and to make it more inclusive. Last October, we launched the Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap. Under this roadmap, by 2023, we want half of financial transactions in the country done digitally and at least 70% of Filipino adults to have financial accounts. With financial digitalization, access to financial products and services become accessible to more people. The BSP issued frameworks for enhanced risk management, open finance, and digital banking. We also launched a program called Digital Pera, or the Personal Equity and Retirement Account, which allows Filipinos to save and invest for retirement using mobile devices. We are seeing good progress in achieving our digitalization goals. The percentage of Filipino adults with formal financial accounts increased from 22.6% in 2017 to 28.6% in 2019. The volume of financial transactions done digitally rose from only 1% in 2013 to between 17 and 18% in the first half of 2020. Over the near term, we expect exponential growth in digital financial transactions and the number of people with formal financial accounts. Last year, over 4 million electronic accounts were created. Financial digitalization has helped most of us adapt to these changing and challenging times. The fruits of this advocacy have become a survival tool during the lockdown and enabled us to continue with our transactions within the safety of our homes. Volume of transactions via InstaPay and PesoNet, the platforms for large and small amount fund transfers, grew year on year last March by 367 and 381% respectively. The BSP also implements financial literacy initiatives. We are building the foundation for an investment-savvy population. With the efforts toward financial digitalization and literacy combined, we are setting the stage for a new Philippine economy, one that is stronger, digitalized, and more inclusive. With all the efforts toward recovery and envision new economy, we have encouraging macroeconomic prospects ahead. For 2021, we expect the economy to grow by 6.5 to 7.5% according to NEDA in Metro Manila and nearby provinces. But because of the ECQ in Metro Manila rather and nearby provinces, the GDP is expected to go down to maybe around 6 to 7%. Inflation is expected to settle slightly above target due to supply-side pressures. Exports and imports will rebound to a growth of 8 and 12% respectively. Remittances will grow next year by 4%. Net inflow of foreign direct investments will rise to $7.8 billion this year from last year's $6.5 billion US. External accounts will remain healthy with hefty gross international reserves and surpluses in the current account and the balance of payments. In closing, I would like to highlight 3 takeaway messages. First, the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the Philippine economy will be transitory. Our fundamentals remain solid, and this will carry us through full recovery. Second, the BSP will continue to support the economy. The BSP will carry out disengagement strategies in a manner that avoids risk associated with early or late implementation. And finally, we do not simply aim to recover. In the post-COVID era, we want to be stronger, more technologically advanced, and more inclusive than ever before. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor Jokno, for a very comprehensive report on our macroeconomic policies, digital transformation, and financial inclusion. Now, before we continue, may we remind everyone to please key in your questions in our chat box, and we will have a question and answer portion after our economic development cluster presentation. Now, at this point, may we call on DBM Secretary Wendell Avisado to discuss the Philippine economy's fiscal performance, strategy, reforms, and outlook. Secretary Avisado, you now have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. I would like to thank the organizers of Sulong, Pilipinas for this opportunity to discuss the country's fiscal performance and the ongoing reforms to improve and strengthen the country's public financial management amidst these challenging and uncertain times. Prior to the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines was one of the fastest growing emerging market economies in the region. In 2019, our economy grew by 6%, meeting the lower end of the Development Budget Coordination Committee's target of 6 to 6.5% for the year. The national government's disbursement performance likewise finished strong at 3.797.7 trillion, posting an 11.4% growth despite the delay in the approval of the 2019 budget. On the other hand, debt as a percentage of GDP continued to decline at 39.6% by the end of 2019 from 39.9% in 2018. It registered better than the program debt to GDP of 41.7% for 2019. This improved debt to GDP ratio can be attributed to the government's prudent cash and debt management supported by stable economic growth. In the early months of 2020, the Philippine economy was vibrant. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government had to impose community quarantine restrictions to manage the increasing COVID cases. Due to the economic slowdown, total national government revenue collections in 2020 decreased to 2.856 trillion or 15.9% of GDP from 3.137 trillion or 16.1% of GDP in 2019. It is worthy to note, however, that the actual revenues exceeded the program by 336.2 billion or 13.3% as the economy gradually reopened during the second half of the year and collecting agencies performed better than expected. Higher non-tax revenues coming mainly from remittances of GOCC dividends were also recorded, which helped fund the government's COVID-19 response. Expectedly, driven by the COVID-19 emergency measures outlined in the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act and the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, national government disbursement grew by 11.3% from 3.797 trillion in 2019 to 4.227 trillion in 2020. In particular, maintenance and other operating expenses, or MOOE, increased by 54.5% from 572.9 billion in 2019 to 885 billion in 2020. This is mainly due to the implementation of COVID-19 related programs, activities, and projects, such as health emergency response efforts, including the procurement of testing kits and personal protective equipment, or PPS, and hiring of additional job order personnel. Social amelioration program under the DSWD Livelihood Employment Assistance Programs to affected workers through the Department of Labor and Employment's COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program or CAMP, Tulong Panghanapbuhay sa ating disadvantaged or distressed workers or TUPAD program, and Abot Kamay ang Pagtulong or ACA program. Disbursements on infrastructure remained robust despite the challenges posed by the pandemic. On the whole, the infrastructure program funded by the national government for the year totaled to 869.5 billion. This is 84 billion or roughly 10.7% higher than the revised 785.5 billion program, when the infrastructure components of subsidy and equity to GOCCs and transfers to local government units are accounted for and reckoned with. This is equivalent to a sizable 4.8% of GDP as compared to 4.2% program for 2020 and 5.4% realized in 2019. The relatively solid infrastructure disbursement performance is attributed to the efforts of the Departments of Public Works and Highways and Transportation to accelerate disbursements and implement projects, health protocols, as well as measures of the economic development cluster to ensure timely implementation of the same. The following programs have been supported by the country's infrastructure spending: road construction and improvement, bridge construction works, bridge repair and bridge retrofitting, flood control projects, local infrastructure projects, convergence programs with several government agencies, namely farm-to-market roads, school buildings, tourism road projects, access roads to airports and seaports, and evacuation centers, and others. We also have the local government support funds and irrigation projects and housing programs. Given the lower revenue collections and increased spending due to the economic impact of the pandemic, the government's deficit level for 2020 has been expanded. The full-year fiscal deficit for 2020 registered at 1.371 trillion, equivalent to 7.6% of GDP. This was a necessary policy response that the government undertook to minimize the socio-economic impact of the health crisis through the substantial increase in social services expenditures, and cognizant of the role of public spending as main economic growth driver during the year. Nevertheless, the administration's prudent fiscal management puts us in a good fiscal position ahead of the pandemic. The economic team commits to pursue a fiscal consolidation strategy to keep the country's fiscal position within sustainable levels. For this year, we project the deficit to expand to 8.9% of GDP. Revenues, on the other hand, are expected to improve to 2.881 trillion, equivalent to 14.4% of GDP. The disbursement level for the year, amounting to 4.662 trillion or 23.3% of GDP, will fund the government's efforts on health, social protection, and economic recovery measures, as well as infrastructure projects. The program disbursements for fiscal year 2021 also account for the extension of the validity of fiscal year 2020 General Appropriations Act until December 31, 2021, and the appropriations under Bayanihan 2 until June 30 of this year. For next year, the deficit will be gradually lowered to 7.3% of GDP as the government continues to implement a fiscal consolidation strategy to rebuild its fiscal space and lessen the burden on borrowings and debt. While we can expect some updates on the medium-term fiscal program to take into account macroeconomic development, our objectives will remain the same. We will sustain our fiscal consolidation strategy with a more calibrated spending for health and social programs, as well as for infrastructure and other recovery measures. To aid in our efforts for a sound public financial management, we are pushing several PFM reforms to promote fiscal discipline and faster service delivery, one of which is the cash budgeting system, or CBS. The CBS prescribes the time frame for obligation, implementation, and payment of completed projects to ensure actual delivery of services within the year to which it is budgeted. In 2018, the DBM prepared the first ever cash-based national budget for calendar year for fiscal year 2019. This is a landmark achievement in terms of putting in place the significant reforms in public financial management that will effectively address the need for expenditure control and budget administration, including such issues as absorptive capacity, fund utilization, and underspending. The year 2019 marked another milestone with the issuance of Executive Order number 91, adopting the cash budgeting system beginning 2019 and for other purposes. Said EO provides that all approved appropriations, except statutory shares and financial subsidy to local government units, shall be made available for obligation and disbursement only until the end of the fiscal year. To institutionalize this reform and ensure the sustainability of its implementation, we are pushing for the passage of the Budget Modernization Bill. If enacted, these legislative measures will modernize the country's budgeting system by establishing holistic and internationally established principles encompassing the whole public financial management process, public sector, and all PFM institutions, resolve the fragmented legal framework on PFM, and support the expansionary fiscal policy of the government for the country's economy. In summary, the Budget Modernization Bill aims for a fast PFM able to respond to the changing needs of time, technology system, and process rise, fiscal discipline and efficient service delivery, automation of public financial management system, and ensure accountability across. Sound fiscal management of the government, transparency, and increased public participation in the budget process. Another key PFM reform that we are pushing is the Budget Treasury and Management System, or BTMS, which will serve as the core of the government's financial management information system. In the time of the new normal, where physical transactions are more difficult, providing a legal framework for honoring transactions done through an information technology system is even more important. The BTMS aims to capture the reports on the actual obligations and disbursements on a timely and accurate basis to be able to guide our decision-making, both in all the oversight PFM agencies as well as in other agencies. Since its implementation in 2017, the BTMS has been rolled out to 124 agencies, or 41.61% of all national government agencies as of December 31, 2020. For fiscal year 2021, the target is to touch base with another 69 agencies. Aside from championing PFM reforms, we are also committed in promoting fiscal transparency. This is crucial as it helps foster government accountability and citizens' participation. As part of our transparency efforts, budget reports and utilization are posted on the DBM website. In fact, we even have a special section for COVID-19 releases on our website. We have released a total of 653.41 billion as of April 15, 2021 to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Bulk of this amount, or 387.17 billion, was released under Bayanihan 1, while 259.78 billion was released under Bayanihan 2. Our efforts on budget transparency is recognized globally. In fact, in the 2019 Open Budget Survey, the Philippines was able to sustain its #1 spot in Southeast Asia. The Philippines 2019 Open Budget Index score climbed to 76 out of 100 from 67 in 2017, surpassing the 2019 and 2029 OBI target scores of 67 and 71 respectively under the Philippine Development Plan. Our score is likewise higher than the global average score of 45 and the OBI scores of other Asian countries like Japan with 62 and South Korea also with 62. As a founding member of the Open Government Partnership, an international platform to make governments more open, accountable, and responsive to their citizens, the Philippines is very much committed in providing avenues for public participation. Under the Duterte administration, we were able to co-create the Philippine Open Government Plan or Program Action Plan for 2017 to 2019 with civil society after 9 months of planning and consultations. Said action plan, launched in August 2017, contains 12 commitments implemented by the national and local governments and civil society organizations. In 2019, the Philippine Open Government Program launched its 5th and first gender-inclusive National Action Plan. It contains 10 commitments, 5 of which will be co-implemented by the government and non-government stakeholders. However, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the PHOGP made necessary revisions on the 5th National Action Plan commitments and made its respective milestone activities adapted to the new normal. It relaunched its co-created 5th National Action Plan on December 2020. The Philippine Open Government Plan likewise conducted several Taguiao town hall meetings to provide avenues for citizens and government officials to interact and discuss local issues and recommendations. In 2020, with the restrictions in social gathering, the town hall meetings were done virtually. Among the topics discussed were in social assistance, education, work, food security, vaccines, and the national ID. Backed by sound macroeconomic fundamentals and a government that is open and transparent, we are confident that we will recover and bounce back stronger this year and in the medium term. We are armed by a national budget that is entirely focused on addressing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have the support of Congress, which has been instrumental in passing the national budget on time and in legislating key measures that will support our recovery, the Bayanihan 1 and 2, the corporate recovery and tax incentives for enterprises, OPA, and the Financial Institution Strategic Transfer, or FIS, to name a few. More importantly, we Filipinos are banded together by the spirit of Bayanihan, more so in these crucial times. That despite our differences in many aspects, we are united by our goal and aspiration to rise above this very difficult situation. Let us continue to pray, for we have a listening God. Let us do our best, for God will do the rest. Let us work together for life to be much better. Patuloy tayong magkapit-bisik at sabay-sabay tayong bumangon at magsama-sama sa pagtulong. Pagpalain tayo ng poong may kapal. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Secretary Wendell Abisado, for our budgetary management and fiscal transparency updates. Now, at this point, we encourage everyone to type in the chat box your questions for our economic managers. Now, the moderator for this session is Mr. Romeo L. Bernardo, a member of the Board of Directors of the Management Association of the Philippines. Presently, he also serves as board in the leading Philippine companies such as Bank of the Philippine Islands, Globe Telecom, Aboitiz Power, RFM Corporation, Philippine Investment Management Incorporated, and the investment company ALFM Mutual Funds, where he is also chairman. Now, he will read the questions of the participants and pass them on to the panel. And now, without further ado, may we call on Sir Romeo to facilitate our question and answer portion.
Thank you very much, ASEC Paula Alvarez. Please allow me to introduce the members of the panel, the Chair of the Economic Development Cluster and Secretary Finance, Carlos Dominguez, Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua, Bangko Sentral and Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Diokno, Budget and Management Secretary Wendell Abisado. Thank you, Honorable Secretaries and Governor, for most informative, insightful, and inspiring presentations. I found situating our present circumstances in the context of bold structural reforms done earlier across a wide front most valuable in providing perspective. While awaiting questions from the chat box, allow me to ask some questions that were crowdsourced in advance. Apologies if already covered in your talk, but you may wish to take this opportunity to expand on what you said. First, on the CREATE bill, would you like to elaborate on what the benefits are of the CREATE law to MSMEs in light of, I guess, some commentary we've been reading that may not have had a full appreciation of the benefits to the MSMEs, in addition, of course, to continuing a decades-long effort in tax reform to make us more tax competitive and to rationalize fiscal incentives. I guess I would direct this to Secretary Dominguez and Secretary Chua.
Yes, thank you. First of all, those comments, of course, are appreciated from some columnists. But I just wonder why they never spoke up in the almost 2 years that this was being discussed in Congress and in the Senate. But anyway, let me just point out that there are two parts of that bill. The first part is lowering the corporate income tax level from 30% to 20% for MSMEs, and for larger corporations, those who have incomes over 5 million pesos, taxable income, from 30 to 25%. So first of all, obviously, the MSMEs have a 5% advantage over the larger corporations. So that means to say that we are leaving more money in their hands, because we know it's the MSMEs that are actually providing a lot more of the employment than the large corporations. So that is first advantage to them. And we realize, as I said, they are the larger employers by and large in the economy. The second part of the bill is, of course, the rationalization of the 13 separate incentive-giving agencies. If you want to have a program, it's better that everybody be coordinated and work towards one goal. The other part of this bill also grants the president a lot of authority to provide non-fiscal incentives. We have had a lot of problems before in attracting large investments, and this will give us a more competitive advantage. But maybe Carl can add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Secretary Dominguez. This CREATE law is over almost 30 years in the making. And I think this is an opportune time to really help our micro, small, and medium corporate enterprises, not only to recover, but also to be more competitive. And this is an important ingredient to our recovery and our long-term competitiveness. The second is we have to look at this particular reform as part of a bigger package. When we presented the tax reform, it was always a package that we committed to help individual taxpayers, which receive the benefit early on, but we cannot abandon or not support also the corporates, and majority of them are small ones. And nowadays, you can form a corporation with a single incorporator. So taken together, I think this is a very important reform that must be done, and it will have long-term impact on good governance and good taxation. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretaries. I have a second question here. Please explain in terms of what makes sense to ordinary people why the Philippine debt growth during the Duterte administration aren't really a problem. Who may I address that to? I guess Secretary Dominguez initially.
Well, debt is an instrument, and like all instruments, it can do good or it can do bad. Okay, if you borrow money and do not invest it properly, it is bad. It is terrible. Okay, but if you invest the money that you borrow in the proper projects that create value, that create employment, that is the ability that lower logistics costs, that is a good investment. Now, the second thing you have to measure debt against is the size of the economy. An economy that is small and borrows 70% of its GDP, has 70% of its GDP in debt, is obviously going to be in difficult straits. But if it is only down to, say, 40% where we were, or even up to 60%, it is still manageable. The third thing is, the other element of debt is its cost. If the interest rates are much lower than your return on investment, then you should borrow. And the return on investment to the government is the growth. So if your interest rates are and your debt service is below the growth of your economy, then you're doing well. However, if you're paying higher interest rates and it's higher than the growth of your economy, then you're obviously doing very poorly. That's just a layman's way of putting it. Okay.
Very, very clear, sir. May I now read from the chat box? This is from PCCI, from Edward Du. It says here for DBM, but I think this is also perhaps for the DOF. What's the latest DBM updates on the implementation of the Supreme Court's decision on the Mandanas case, particularly on the partial devolution of national government functions to the LGUs? Thank you.
Yeah, I yield to Wendell Abisado.
Thank you very much for that question. The latest estimated fiscal implication of the Supreme Court ruling is about 239 billion, or roughly 28% increase in the share of the local government units from the national taxes by fiscal year 2022 compared to their current level of share. In preparation for the implementation of the Supreme Court ruling in the Mandanas-Garcia case, the DBM, together with the economic managers and principally Secretary Sani Dominguez, has continued our consultations with the concerned national government agencies to discuss their respective devolution transition plans, the definition of service delivery standards for the devolved functions and services, and the formulation of their capacity development strategies, particularly for the LGUs. On the other hand, the Interagency Technical Working Group has also conducted a series of consultation meetings with the local government units, various leagues, to gather insights from local chief executives on the implementation of the ruling. Currently, with the assistance of the USAID Deliver Project, a communications strategy is being rolled out to address the key challenges identified in light of the implementation of the Mandanas ruling. An inception workshop between identified national government agencies and local government units leagues representatives will be conducted next month to provide a collaborative working environment where both the national government and the local government units representatives can align their policies. We hope that the results of these inception workshops will allow a smooth transition towards the full implementation of the Supreme Court ruling next year. In addition, the Interagency Technical Working Group has already submitted a draft executive order on the full devolution to the Office of the President last January 2021. This executive order, as proposed, will clarify the delineation of the national government and local government roles and responsibilities, provide guidelines for the preparation of the devolution transition plans, and provide as well the mechanics for the proposed growth equity fund, among many others. And we are assured that the proposed executive order will be signed in due time. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. While I have you, might as well ask a related question. This is from PhilExport, Lenny Abella. What does budget 2021 to show to improve the salary rates of nurses and other frontline workers compared to their uniformed counterparts? Medical practitioners have expressed the dwindling supply of reliable nursing support during the COVID challenging time. If I may follow up on that, this might be also related to the arrears of PhilHealth to hospitals, which also affect the private hospitals especially, which also affects their ability to sustain their workforce as well as undertake needed expansion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the question. Probably I'll be in authority to answer the first question. The second, it could really be PhilHealth, or for that matter, maybe Secretary Sani can help. But on the first question, to comply with Section 32 of Republic Act 9173 or the Philippine Nursing Act of 2002, and with the Supreme Court ruling on NARS Party List et al. Versus the Executive Secretary, the DBM complied with the Supreme Court ruling, and that we increased the entry level for nurses in the government from salary grade 11 to salary grade 15. Please note that except for that decision on increasing the entry level, there is no other mention of increasing the salaries of other salary grades. And so it did not in any way increase the salaries of the other salary grades. It only focused on the entry level, increasing that from salary grade 11 to salary grade 15. And so there is a joint memorandum circular that we have prepared together with the Department of Health in trying to restructure the way the salary grade should be in light of the Supreme Court ruling. And it is now with the Department of Health. But we are also in consultation with Congress precisely to look in its totality, the salary structure of nurses, not only the entry level, but going up to the level of nurse 7, which is salary grade 24 and thereabouts, but certainly not to increase their salary because there is no law that increases it. And also at the same time, it is not part of the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court decision talked only of the entry level, nothing more and nothing less. If I need to clarify that, probably for those who will really be interested, our office is always open to explain the rest of this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary. A question from Francorp Vida Jean Cabanalit. This one is especially for NEDA and BSP. Is the 6 to 7.5% growth achievable in 2022? I guess maybe she means 2021. Having a base of 9.5 negative this year, what are the plans of government to really achieve this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Romy, and to the question. First of all, we have a target of 6.5 to 7.5% this year. And we are still early in the year, I think, to make changes. We have not yet seen the impact of the ECQ and our quarantine on the first quarter, so I would wait for more data. What we have seen so far is prior to the spike, we have significant improvement. Our import is, as of February, is a slight positive, and our export is a slight negative. We have also recovered fully all the jobs lost from the ECQ last year, in excess of 600,000. And right now we are enforcing an ECQ and MECQ, but it is different from last year. We allow people to work. Our public transport is functional. Construction is ongoing. So there are some changes from how we experienced quarantine last year. And although this ECQ and MECQ period may affect our growth, on the other hand, we still have 8 full months of the year to recover. And there are 3 ways to recover and to be on track with our growth. The first one is a more risk-managed approach to dealing with the virus. Instead of quarantining the entire area, we can have more localized quarantine that addresses the areas or sectors with the highest risk instead of affecting everyone. The second is we have a package of recovery measures amounting to around 15% of GDP. The goal here is to accelerate the delivery of this important recovery package. And the third one is we continue our vaccination program so that we continue to reduce the risk, especially to senior citizens and those with comorbidities, so that the overall population can be allowed to work with the lowest risk possible. Thank you.
Before I pass on to Governor Ben, maybe a related question as well. If you'd like to add to what Secretary Carl said, what are the factors being considered for the exit strategy of monetary policy support interventions implemented due to COVID? Thank you. Secretary, yeah.
Well, on the growth target, as you know, Romy, the development under the Development Budget Coordination Committee, the growth targets are set by NEDA. Okay, so I go along with the explanation of Secretary Carl. Okay, now what are the factors that we are going to look into before we disengage? I think it makes sense that we look at the whether the growth is sustainable, whether there's traction, right? And so growth target, the inflation, of course, and of course, employment. Those are the things that we consider.
Okay. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Honorable Secretaries. I'm told that our time is up. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Romeo, for moderating our Q&A, and thank you to our secretaries of the Economic and Development Cluster. Now that ends our session 1, and we thank you very much for your active participation. Now we proceed to the second session that will highlight the accomplishments and updates of the infrastructure cluster, particularly the DPWH, BCDA, DOTR, and DICT. Now, for our first panelist, may we call on the Chair of the Infrastructure Cluster and Public Works and Highway Secretary, Mark Villar, to give us updates on the government's Build, Build, Build program. Secretary Villar, you now have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Secretary Dominguez of the Economic Development Cluster, my fellow colleagues in the Cabinet, our friends from the private sector and the academe, our development partners, and to the millions of our kababayans all over the world, good morning, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. The year 2020 was truly challenging due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The infrastructure sector is not exempt. In response, the infrastructure cluster is even more committed to deliver strategic infrastructure programs and projects that will protect the people's well-being and support their economic aspirations. Thus, it is with honor and humility that I speak to you today on behalf of the Cabinet's infrastructure cluster to report on the cluster's efforts despite the challenging circumstances we are faced with. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic showed the need to further improve the country's healthcare facilities and digital infrastructure. Testing, isolation, treatment facilities, augmentation of healthcare facilities, and construction of quarantine isolation facilities were the most urgent initiatives last year because these are the most important undertakings to control the pandemic and protect the welfare of the Filipino people. As of April 2021, the national government, in partnership with the private sector and the local government unit, 653 COVID-19 facilities with 24,117 bed capacity have been completed, which consists of quarantine isolation facilities, modular hospitals, and off-site dormitories for medical personnel and other frontliners. Prior to the pandemic, the country's 2019 spending on infrastructure drastically increased. It surpassed the 5% of GDP, which is twice as much as the country's average total spending for the past 50 years. The government is committed to further increase its efforts to pump prime the economy with more infrastructure projects to stimulate both short-term growth through employment generation and long-term growth by increasing the productive capacity of our roads, ports, airports, and other infrastructure projects. Roads and bridges constructed and upgraded to improve linkages and inter-island connectivity, which is important given the Philippines is an archipelago. Built the new smart city that is modern, well-planned, disaster-resilient, environment-friendly, and sustainable. Provided efficient transportation infrastructure systems that narrow the geographic and physical divide, connecting the country, its islands, and its people to the rest of the world. In fast-tracking infrastructure development, government health protocols will religiously be adhered to so as not to run the risk of exposing our workers. Given the significant disruptions in the country's economic activities and limits on the movement of people caused by the pandemic, the updated 2017 to 2022 Philippine Development Plan prioritizes technological development and adoption of digital infrastructure to assist the country in its transition into the new normal, ensure seamless delivery of basic services, and facilitate economic recovery through the expansion of economic opportunities in different sectors of development nationwide. In this regard, we have the Secretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Secretary Greg Onasan, to give updates on how infrastructure will aid in transitioning to a digital economy. The pandemic likewise emphasized the need for sufficient transportation services that can move more people while trying to limit the possible means of transmission of the virus. Non-motorized transportation has likewise gained much attention as an alternative mode of transportation. Secretary Art.
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng patnubay at gabay ng magulang para sa
to the state related problems of the state's capital. Development of the new Clark City will help create economic gravity to disperse economic action away from the Metro Manila. Secretary Vince Dizon of the Basis Conversion and Development Authority will provide updates on the new Clark City. As the country's engineering and construction arm, the Department of Public Works and Highways implemented more than half of the Philippines government infrastructure spending. The actual disbursements made by the department increased by 209% from 820 billion peso disbursements from 2011 to 2015 to 2.5 trillion pesos from 2016 to 2020. DPWH kept its commitment in the development and implementation of major programs and projects that support the national development objectives. Our main strategy is to build well-planned, sustainable, and integrated infrastructures that will decongest and avoid over-concentration of socioeconomic activities in highly urbanized areas and promote regional and rural development. The Philippines is one of the countries located that is vulnerable to natural calamities and hazards, experiencing an average of about 20 typhoons per year. With many of the communities submerged to flooding whenever a typhoon passes our archipelago, DPWH developed and implemented resilient infrastructures, including non-structural measures that will improve the community's capacity to anticipate, mitigate, and withstand and recover from a disaster. As of December of 2020, 10,366 flood mitigation structures were completed. The construction of 2 off-site retarding basins under the flood risk management project for Imus River has an overall accomplishment of 70% and targeted to be completed in October of 2021. Another priority flood control project of DPWH is the flood risk management project in Cagayan de Oro, which is set to be completed by next year. The project will expand protected flood-prone areas and strengthen the resiliency to climate change and other hazards of the communities along the Cagayan de Oro River stretch. The government also prioritizes social infrastructure projects that will address the gaps in the provision of basic social infrastructure facilities and services which are necessary for human capital development. First, we have the Tcas Program. 89 projects were completed that will help enhance the capability and readiness of the military and the police in providing an environment of peace and security in the country. The Basic Educational Facilities Program aims to address the physical facility requirements of all public and secondary schools nationwide and to provide a conducive learning environment to safe, secure, and sustainable school infrastructures. As of December of 2020, a total of 144,925 classrooms were constructed in various public schools nationwide, while 2,036 school workshop buildings and other facilities were constructed, rehabilitated, and improved. One example is the General Gregorio del Pilar High School in Bulacan. Establishment of the National High School at the central portion of the municipality of Bulacan will decongest the existing 4 secondary schools in Bulacan of overpopulation. Evacuation centers are being built in every region and province of the country to minimize the use of school buildings as temporary shelter for those affected by typhoons and other calamities. During the pandemic, the regional evacuation centers were utilized as COVID-19 quarantine and isolation facilities. 187 completed evacuation centers with 130 ongoing. Under the land transport, existing road network will be expanded and upgraded, and strategic inter-island bridges will be given priority to provide alternative modes of transport between major islands, especially in times of disaster. Under the Duterte administration, DPWH was able to construct, widen, upgrade, rehabilitate, and strengthen 5,555 bridges. Notable completed bridge projects include the Pigalo Bridge in Isabela, the Angat River Bridge in Bulacan, Anduyan Bridge in La Union, Calibo Bridge in Aklan, Pindiaman Bridge in Sultan Kudarat, Governor Miranda Bridge 2 in Davao del Norte. On the other hand, 26,494 kilometers of roads all over the country were constructed, maintained, widened, upgraded, and rehabilitated. One of the notable completed projects of the DPWH is the Laguna Lake Highway, which has a protected bike lane to promote active transport and zero carbon footprint. Other completed road projects include the Ordinata City Bypass Road in Pangasinan and the Pulilan-Baliwag Diversion Road, Bulacan. The Lucena City Underpass in Quezon, the Palo West Bypass Road in Leyte, the Valencia Bypass Road in Bukidnon, and many others. The Department of Tourism DPWH Convergence Program, or the Tourism Board Tourism Road Infrastructure Program, is aligned with the strategic direction of the National Tourism Development Plan to improve access and connectivity to tourism gateways, service centers, and tourism sites. As of December of 2020, 2,192 kilometers of tourism roads have been completed. The 9.8 kilometer Sabangan-Sagada Road in Mountain Province is targeted to be completed next year. This will provide easy and safe access to famous tourist spots up north, such as the Hanging Coffins and the Sumaging Cave. Construction and upgrading of the 22-kilometer Boracay Circumferential Road will reduce travel time from Pacpan Port to Iligan Beach from 1 hour and 15 minutes to just 30 minutes. The Department of Trade and Industry has also partnered with the DPWH to implement the Roads Leveraging Linkages for Industry and Trade, or ROLIT program, which aims to enhance road connectivity that links industry and trade center in priority economic and manufacturing zones in the country. As of December of 2020, 606 kilometers of access roads leading to industries and trade corridors were completed. One of the priority ROLIT projects is the Poro Point Freeport Zone Road in La Union, which was completed last December of 2020. Linkages towards seaports, airports, and railway stations are also constructed under the Kalsada Tungo sa Paliparan, Piles, at Taongan, or Katuparan program. 406 kilometers of road were completed under this program, which aims to further augment the logistics, transport, and economic activities in all these key transport hubs. The Dapa Port, Consuelo Corazon's Station, Cruz, and General Luna Road in Siargao Island is targeted to be completed in June of 2021. It enhances the accessibility and mobility of tourism, people's goods and services in the country's world-renowned surfing capital. The much-needed boost in our agriculture industry will be augmented by the Agri-Infrastructure Support Program. Under this program, farm-to-market or local road networks are also being built and improved to service our farmers in the countryside in order to ensure food security. As of December of 2020, 1,835 kilometers of farm-to-market roads were constructed and improved. The Inter-Island Linkage Mega Bridge Program will provide linkages among the various islands of the country through the construction of short and long-span bridges. Among the projects under this program is 3.17 kilometer Pangil Bay Bridge, 3.9 kilometer Samar Island Davao City Bridge, the the 32.15 kilometer Bataan-Cabita Interlink Bridge, and then the 3.3 kilometer Cebu-Mactan Bridge. The completion of the Pangil Bay Bridge will reduce travel time between Tubod, Mindanao del Norte, and Tangub in Misamis Occidental from 2.5 hours to just 7 minutes. The Metro Manila Logistics Improvement Program involves the construction of new bridges crossing Pasig and Marikina rivers and Manggahan floodway. New alternative linkages between major thoroughfares will be constructed to increase the number of usable roadways that would decongest traffic in EDSA and other major roads in Metro Manila. The BGC Ortega Central Link project is now 80% complete. Travel time between BGC and Ortega Central Business District will be reduced to just 12 minutes. This year, we also target the complete construction of the Binondo Intramuros Bridge in Manila. On the other hand, the Estrella Pantaleon Bridge connecting Makati and Mandaluyong is also expected to be finished by the third quarter of this year. Bridges in the countryside are also being prioritized to promote local and regional development. The completion of Abusag Bridge in Cagayan will reduce travel time between Tugigaraw City, Cagayan, and Bagao, Cagayan from 2 hours and 30 minutes to just 1 hour and 30 minutes. The project is targeted to be completed in 2021. The Tagum City flyover along Agusan-Davao Road in Davao del Norte is already 87% complete. The construction of high-standard highways and expressways will not only give way to regional economic development, but contribute greatly to social growth. With reduced travel time, Filipinos will be able to visit their loved ones and friends more often. The completion of the Metro Cebu Expressway will reduce travel time between Naga City and Danao City from 3 hours to 1 hour and 10 minutes. The Naga-Minglanilla-Talisay boundary section is ongoing. The construction of the country's longest mountain tunnel has finally started under the Davao City Bypass Project. The 18-kilometer Davao City Coastal Road will reduce travel time from Toril to Poblacion from 45 minutes to 15 minutes. A large section of this project is to be completed this year. One of the game-changing projects of the government is the Luzon Spine Expressway Network Program. A total of 1,101 kilometers of high-standard highways, expressways in Luzon are targeted to be implemented to reduce travel time between Ilocos and Bicol from 20 hours to 9 hours. We have already completed last year the final section of the 89-kilometer Piplex, the Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway, and to further promote the development of Northern Luzon, Piplex will be extended with an additional 59-kilometer section up to San Juan, La Union. The 30-kilometer Central Luzon Link Expressway is targeted to be finished by July of this year. Travel time from Tarlac City to Cabanatuan City will be reduced to just 20 minutes. The expansion and widening of Angat Bridge under the Artillery Road Bypass project is already completed. The completed NX Harbor Link Segment 10 has reduced travel time from Valenzuela City to C3 Caloocan City from 1 hour to just 5 minutes. Another NX Harbor Link is the C3 R10 section, which has shortened travel time from port area to NX and vice versa from 60 minutes to 10 minutes. One of the most awaited projects is the Nxs Connector Road, which is expected to reduce travel time from NX to SLEX from 2 hours to just 20 minutes. One of the recently opened projects is the Metro Manila Skyway Stage 3, which has reduced travel time from Buendia to Balintawak from 2 hours to 15 to 20 minutes. We also have the Alabang Sukat Skyway Connection Ramp Extension, which is 62% complete, and the northbound ramp is already operational. With the completion of the NAES Phase 2, travel time between Skyway and Terminal 1 was reduced from 24 to 8 minutes. The Manila-Cabita Toll Expressway Project, C5 South Link Expressway, is a 7.7-kilometer expressway from R1 to SLEX C5. Travel time from R1 to C5 will be reduced from 40 minutes to 10 minutes. The Southeast Metro Manila Expressway, C6, will reduce travel time from Bicutan to Batasan from 1 hour and 50 minutes to 26 minutes and will benefit around 88,000 motorists per day. The construction of the 44-kilometer Cabita-Laguna Expressway will reduce travel time between Cavitex and SLEX from 1 hour and 30 minutes to 45 minutes. The Laguna section of the project is already complete, and the next exit will be opened in the second quarter of this year. With the South Luzon Expressway Toll Road 4, Travel time to Santa Tomas, Batangas to Lucena will be reduced from 4 hours to 1 hour and will benefit 17,000 travelers per day. The South Luzon Expressway Toll Road 5 is a 416-kilometer divided toll road from the terminal point of Nxs PR4 project and ends at Matlog Sorsogon. The evaluation of the project's basic design is ongoing. The ongoing 15-kilometer Camarines Sur Expressway to connect the municipalities of San Fernando and Pili in the province of Camarines Sur. Travel time will be reduced from 51 to 11 minutes. Expansion and improvement of road network in the regions are also being prioritized. The completion of the Sorsogon City Coastal Bypass is expected to reduce travel time by as much as 43 minutes. The 6-kilometer road project is already 78% complete and for completion this year. The Laguna-Quezon Connector will bring vast potential to the development of the local tourism industry. Travel time from Alaminos, Laguna to Chaong, Quezon will be reduced from 45 to 20 minutes. A large section is already open. The project is 35% complete. One of the priority projects of the department in Visayas is the 49-kilometer Bacolod-Negros Occidental Economic Highway, which aims to reduce travel time from Victoria City to Bacolod Silay Airport by 40 minutes. The project is 41% complete. Travel time between Barangay San Juan Ormoc City and Barangay Naungan Ormoc City will be reduced from 30 minutes to 10 minutes with the Ormoc City Diversion Road. The project is 84% complete and targeted to be open by August this year. The Samar Pacific Coastal Road is envisioned to link the so-called Pacific towns. Its completion will complement and eventually establish a circumferential road loop of Samar Island. The project is almost 50% complete. Currently, there's no direct linkage between Zamboanga del Norte and Zamboanga del Sur, 2nd District. After the completion of the Sindangan-Bayog-Lakewood Road, the travel time of 6 hours between the two provinces will be reduced to about 2 hours. The project is now 60% complete. We also have the program for the support to rehabilitation and construction of Marawi City and its surrounding areas, which is scheduled to be completed by July of this year. The 3 road projects under the Improving Growth Corridors in Mindanao road sector is more than halfway complete, while the construction of the Gicam Bridge in Zamboanga, Sibugay started last January of 2021. Last but most definitely not the least is the 66-kilometer Suralya Tibolis San Jose Road. It will serve as an alternate route to General Santos City, which will reduce the 2-hour travel time by 45 minutes, and the project is 77% complete. While the time of the current administration is winding down, the infrastructure cluster will continue exerting all efforts to ensure that the Build, Build, Build program is implemented to its fullest extent. While the cluster's job is not yet mission accomplished, it is with full confidence that I take pride in the cluster's accomplishments over the last 5 years. Without a doubt, the achievements of the cluster will provide a good foundation for the next administration and will support the economy once it opens without restrictions. Moreover, I am honored with these accomplishments because through these, I, together with my fellow cluster members, as well as those supporting us in the background, have been of service to the Filipino people. I would like to thank everyone for supporting us in this 5-year journey. Thank you to the members of the infrastructure cluster who are in the forefront of delivering results of the cluster. Maraming salamat sa ating mga kababayan, sa inyong pagtitiwala at sa pag-unawa. The country had its shares of ups and downs over the past 5 years, and the cluster has not been perfect. Nonetheless, we have been able to persevere even amidst this pandemic because of the spirit, faith, and trust of the Filipino people. Muli, maraming salamat po at mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you, Secretary Villar, for the overview of our infrastructure cluster and for the updates on our Philippine inter-island connectivity through roads and bridges. Now, may I turn on the floor to the Presidential Advisor on Flagship Programs and Projects and Deputy Chief Implementer of the National Action Plan Against COVID-19, BCDA President and CEO, Secretary Vivencio Vince Dizon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Paula, to our head of the economic team, Secretary Sunny Dominguez, to my partners in the infrastructure cluster led by Secretary Mark Villar and Secretary Art Tugade, and to all our colleagues in government, thank you very much. To the private sector, members of civil society, thank you very much for being here today. The presentation of Secretary Villar highlights that despite the very, very challenging and difficult moment for the entire country and the whole world, there is a ray of hope. And one of those rays of hope is really what the president started way back in 2016 when he took on the reins of government. And that is this unprecedented infrastructure build-up, which is aptly called Build, Build, Build. Secretary Villar has shown tremendous momentum in Build, 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 despite the pandemic and despite all of the challenges moving forward. Build, Build, Build will not only serve as a stimulus for our present situation, but will serve as a major part of our recovery moving forward. And for the BCDA group, we focused on one very, very important aspect of Build, Build, Build. And that is, how do we build a city unlike any other in the country today? How do we show a model for cities in the Philippines for the future? And we focus on Clark. I would like to share with you our updates on Clark, beginning with, I hope you can see the screen, beginning with a short video of what our vision was when we started out and moving forward into our updates of our progress in the past 4 or 5 years.
Clark is a city built as living proof that business in this part of the world is not only easy, but simply better. This is a city with limitless ambition, built for business and built for people so that life is always well lived. This is Clark.
The vision for Clark as part of the Build, Build, Build program has always been building a city for people. Simple as that may seem, unfortunately, many of our cities in the country and even in the world are not built for people. They are cities that are congested, that have been environmentally degraded, and simply in some cases unlivable. And we wanted to show that a city built, truly built for people was really possible. One of the major projects under the Build, Build, Build program is the Clark International Airport expansion. In 2018, we awarded the Clark International Airport contract to our partners, Megawide GMR. And also, a little after that, we awarded the operations and maintenance contract to a consortium involving Philinvest, Robinsons, Tags, and the operator of the #1 airport in the world, Changi Airport Group. And in only 24 months, the renders that you see on your left are now almost reality. Our partners have made this possible, and it is truly a testament to how an effective public-private partnership can work. In cooperation with the DOTR, we are very, very happy to report that we are now in the final stages of fit out and equipping the airport at 80%. And we are confident that we will be able to inaugurate this world-class airport run by world-class operators next month. Because of the investments that we have made in Clark and the infrastructure investments under Build, 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 we were able to convince and attract a major logistics operator, the #1 logistics operator in the world, FedEx, to come back to the Philippines and make Clark its home. And today, we have in a 2.6 hectare facility in the airport complex, FedEx is almost complete with its state-of-the-art facility that will hopefully be operational by the third quarter of this year. Thanks to the work of the Department of Transportation led by Secretary Tugade, the Clark International Airport Corporation, the Clark Development Corporation, and DCDA, we were able to attract FedEx back to the Philippines, and with even more prospects of expansion for the future. The next project that really highlights our vision of making Clark into not only a city of the future, but a city truly for people, is New Clark City. A testament to the vision of continuity and the principles of continuity of the Duterte administration, this project, which was started by the previous administration, was not only continued, but was vigorously fast-tracked by the current administration. And because of this, we now have the beginnings of a truly modern, green, resilient, and smart city. As many of you experienced, months before the pandemic hit us, the nation celebrated as we won as overall champion of the 2019 Southeast Asian Games. And not only did we win overall champion, we also won the admiration of countries all over ASEAN, including our more developed countries, our more developed neighbors, because of the facilities we built, not only for the Southeast Asian Games, but for every Filipino athlete in the coming years. Our athletes performed so well in world-class facilities, the first of their kind built since the 1930s, when the Philippine government, still then under the American Commonwealth, built the Rizal Memorial Sports Complex in Manila. And it has truly given us pride, but we're not stopping there. As President Duterte signed Executive Order 21 last year, President Duterte made the bold move of mandating government offices to begin the process of relocating, beginning with their satellite offices from Metro Manila to New Clark City. Not only will this build up this brand new city that we are developing just less than 100 kilometers from the nation's capital, but it will also help tremendously in the decongestion of Metro Manila for its urban renewal in the future. And because of this bold action on the part of the Duterte administration, we see that we have attracted major partners in the private sector, not only in the Philippines, but all over the world. We have been joined by the likes of AECOM, the likes of the Japan Overseas Network for Transport and Urban Development, Sorbana Jurong of Singapore, Changi Airports Group, Marubeni Corporation of Japan, Kansai Electric, Chubu Electric, the Tahal Group of Israel, and also GMR of India. All of these top-notch infrastructure and development firms have joined us in promoting and developing this new city because of the bold vision and the bold execution of the Duterte administration in the last 3 years. New Clark City is a 9,450 hectare property with a projected population of 1.2 million people, projected employment of more than 600,000 workers, providing for land rights through either lease or joint venture agreements, and has, as we have shown, has already attracted many of the major developers both in the Philippines and abroad. The New Clark City's government center has already attracted major government agencies to relocate to New Clark City, beginning with the UPPGH and also with a major grant from the British government to provide green spaces throughout New Clark City. We have also attracted the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, who will begin construction of a 30-hectare facility which includes the minting and currency production facility that is currently in East Avenue in Quezon City and which will relocate in New Clark City in the next few years. Construction of this facility will begin by the last quarter of this year or early next year. The Supreme Court will build its first judiciary regional center in almost 6 hectares in New Clark City, beginning next year. The Department of Agriculture has just signed for a 30-hectare agro-industrial hub and national seed technology park, which it will build starting this year. The National Academy of Sports, a law that was signed last year on June 9, will build on a 3-hectare facility and will provide training for our booming athletes all the way from high school and as they transition to university and as they train for the national training pool. Very important for our pandemic response in the future is the establishment of the Virology Science and Technology Institute of the Philippines by the Department of Science and Technology. This will also find its home in CLA. The National Bureau of Investigation will be moving to a huge facility together with other justice agencies in the coming months. Philindes Land is almost completed with phase 1 of its 288-hectare property, roughly about 100 hectares, and will begin to accept locators in the 3rd or 4th quarter of 2021. The first banyan tree resort in the country will open in the next couple of years in a 450-hectare mountain resort area together with Widas Group, a Korean investor who also owns Marriott in Clark. Another Korean group will also be building a golf club and resort in a 250-hectare property in the mountains of New Clark City. Construction already began in 2018, and this will continue on, hopefully will finish by the year 2022, despite the challenges of the pandemic. So as you can see, we have really shown that if you build it, they will come. And as we have shown in the many projects showcased by Secretary Villar and those that will be showcased by Secretary Tugade and those that you now see in Clark with the airport in New Clark City, once we build it, investments will come even despite the pandemic. And we are looking forward to this building momentum even past the Duterte administration and moving into the next administration. With that, thank you very much to everyone, and please continue on staying safe, and God bless us all as we move towards hopefully the end of this very difficult time in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary Vince Dizon, for those updates on our new Clark and sustainable city, as well as our new investors in the Philippines. Now, may we call on the stage our Secretary of the Department of Transportation, Secretary Arthur Tugade, to provide updates on the transportation sector. Thank you very much, Secretary Tugade. The floor is now yours.
The Honorable Secretary of Finance, Secretary Sunny Dominguez, my fellow servants in government, distinguished guests, friends from the media, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. When the Duterte administration took office in May 2016, we were greeted with numerous long-standing issues that have tormented the countries for years and even decades. I remember fully well when we were only starting to take on the challenge 5 years ago. The Filipino people have pinned their hopes to the new administration then, with eyes intently and critically watching on what we would do next. 5 taon ho ang nakakaraan na kung saan binabato at tinatanong at karamihan kinukutsa yung administrasyon kung paano aadresin po yung mga problema na dinatnan namin nung ang administrasyon Duterte ay naupo. 5 years ago, problems seemed insurmountable. Some even thought addressing them was impossible. But as I always said, watch us. The most difficult we do right away, the impossible will take a little bit of time. Together today, let's recall and review what has been done, what was the issues and the realities 5 years ago when the Duterte administration took over. By revisiting and recalling what transpired then, we will be in a better position and a better perspective to understand and realize what this Duterte administration has done. For today's presentation, I choose 10 realities and issues that perhaps will set the predicate for us to be able to do a worthwhile presentation. Let us revisit the issues and the problems that confronted us then. Reality number 1, sino po ba sa atin ang makakalimot sa tinatawag na laglag bala at bukas bagahe? Noon ho, travelers at NAIA, whether locals or foreigners, use padlocks, plastic wraps and tapes to cover their luggages because of the infamous laglag bala, extortion racket, and bukas bagay. It was a very embarrassing situation for our country then. Reality number 2, ang lisensya, papel lang po at hindi card nung kami nag-assume 5 years ago. Our drivers were only given paper receipts as licenses. Mahigit 3 milyon ang backlog sa driver's licenses. Reality number 3, noon po ang Pilipinas, imbes na makilalang Pearl of the Orient Seas, mas sumikat bilang republikang walang plaka. Then, no plate was ever released for all. Problema ho talaga yung lisensya. LTO then even recorded an 8 million backlog on licenses plates alone from 2013 to 2016. Reality number 4. Alam po natin, ladies and gentlemen, at maaalala natin ang tinatawag nilang EDSA Carmageddon. Noon, araw-araw ang pagbiyahe sa EDSA ay tinuturing na isang pandirigma. The traffic congestion was worsened by illegal terminals, buses loading and unloading everywhere they want. Halo-halo po ang sasakyan at kapansin-pansin din na walang bike lane para sa mga siklista. Reality number 5. Noong araw na yon, MRT3 was compared to the horror movie titled Train to Busan. It was even called MRT Tirik, as passengers were pestered by daily numerous breakdowns, unloading incidents, trail derailment, and hours of waiting between the transportation schedules on the trains. And worse, kung tumirik po ang tren, ang mga pasahero, no choice kundi maglakad sa ibabaw ng riles. Reality number 6. Numerous rail projects were left hanging, including the LRT1 Cabita extension and MRT7, wherein not a single post was built when we came in. The common station was delayed for 9 years, and the Metro Manila subway, which was initially planned in 1973. Ang PNR, panahon pa ho din ho ni Kopong-Kopong, hindi man lang nakatikim ng isang bagong tren o bagong bagon. Reality number 7. Worse, far from that 1,000-kilometer railroad network in the 1970s, our country's operating railway train was only limited to 77 kilometers in 2016. Tayo lang noon, ang bansa sa Asia, na imbis bumaba ang riles ng tren tayo ho ay talagang kinapos at kinulang ng rails operation. Reality number 8, various seaports and airports devastated by natural calamities such as strong earthquakes and typhoons beginning in 2013, kagaya nung nangyari sa Tacloban, Ormoc, and Bohol, were left in a decrepit, very sorry state. Reality number 9, there was no significant progress in vital international airports. Wala po. Take for example the Bicol International Airport, which was delayed for no less than 11 years and even underwent 3 groundbreakings. Saan ka pa po nakakita na isang airport na plinano, mas marami pa ho yung tinatawag na groundbreaking kesa yung pag-umpisa ng proyekto. Nandiyan din ho yung Bohol International Airport, which began feasibility study in year 2000 with no actual construction when we assume. Ito po yung malungkot na kalagayan ng ating mga paliparan nung tayo'y nag-assume some 5 years ago. And reality number 10, our Philippine Coast Guard only has 20% operational lighthouses all over the country with outdated and insufficient maritime security assets that are incapable of patrolling the high seas. Ito ho yung 10 realidad na ating binaybay sa ating nakaraan upang sa ganon, bigyan kaliwanagan natin yung presentasyon at detalye na ating ihahayag na kung saan sasagutin ho natin ano ba yung ginawa ng Administrasyon Duterte in the last 5 years. Considering the 10 issues raised, let us revisit the realities one by one. Reality number 1, from being one of the worst airports in the world, the NAIA was recognized as one of the top 10 most improved airports in the world. And more importantly, wala na pong laglag bala, wala na pong bukas bagahe, and travelers, foreigners or local, can travel with the least fear of pilferage and attacks on their cargo. Today, we are also continuously pushing for the upgrade of NAIA into a gateway that will stand the world. Alam po namin na hindi natuloy yung unsolicited proposal. Balitaan ko lang po na notwithstanding this stoppage on the unsolicited proposal on the improvements of the NAIA transformation continue to go on and on as we speak. In fact, as we speak, nandiyan na ho yung mga pinagandang taxiway, yung pinagandang runway. Nang sa gayon, ang paliparan na NAIA ay isang kikilalanin na paliparan sa buong mundo. Reality number 2, from only paper receipts, the Land Transportation Office or LTO began to roll out new driver's license card with 5-year validity. The 3 million backlog in 2016 was addressed. Not only this year, we will also be distributing driver's license with 10 years validity. Reality number 3, from Republican Walang Plaka, the LTO since 2018 has already been producing our vehicle license plate through the LTO plate making facility. Robot po ito, high-tech ika nga, which features a high-tech plate making robot. In fact, as of March 2021, a total of 3 million pairs of motor vehicle plates were produced and distributed by the LTO. Reality number 4, from numerous plans, schemes, and proposals to decongest EDSA, having most of them either during that time being highly criticized or defiled The transformation of our main thoroughfare is well underway in the establishment of the EDSA busway. Now, even with dedicated medium lanes for public utility buses, travel time from Monumento to Pasay is significantly reduced from nearly 3 hours to only 45 to 50 minutes. Along with the operation of the EDSA busway, we have started the establishment of bike lane networks in cooperation with the Department of Public Works and MMDA to promote the active transportation system and to ensure the safety of cyclists and other road users. Today, as we speak, we have already completed 296 kilometers of bike lanes all over Metro Manila and including Cebu and Davao. Our target is to complete 540 kilometers by the end of this year. Reality number 5, let's revisit and look at the railway sector. I mentioned earlier the sorry state of MRT3 that we witnessed when we came in. Ang tanong, kumusta naman po yung MRT ngayon? From countless breakdowns, the MRT3 no longer records unloading incident as its massive rehabilitation will be completed by December of this year. From a sluggish train running at only 25 to 30 kilometers per hour, ngayon po sinasapol at tatagumpayan po natin yung takbo ng ating MR3 at 60 kilometers per hour. Waiting time between trains was reduced from 9 minutes to just 3.5 minutes. And now we are ready and we are using 23 trains from what it was in the past, 10 to 14 trains. Aside from getting faster, the MRT3 has also become cooler with the new air conditioning units that have been successfully installed. Kaya nga yung problema noon, ang sabi nila, bakit ang init-init ng MRT3? Ngayon ho, may problema pa rin. Ang tanong, bakit ang lamig-lamig ng MRT3? Bago na rin ho ang mga relays sa MRT3 kung saan dati ho ang takbo ng tren ay parang roller coaster. Patakbo-takbo, padribol-dribol. Ngayon po, dahil nakukompleto na yung relays at maayos na yung ating maintenance, ang takbo ho ay maayos, matiwasay at sakto lang. To further catch up with our railway sector development backlog, the DOTR closed year 2020 with 34 awarded railway contracts. This is a huge increase from only 29 railway contracts that existed when we took over in 2016. And we expect to add 20 more contracts before we step down in 2022. From being stalled for many years or even decades, here are some of the long-delayed projects that we are now working on. First, the Metro Manila Subway, our country's first underground railway system. This was first conceived, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, in 1973. After 40 years, and 6 administration, actual construction began in 2019 with site clearing works at the Valenzuela Depot. Parts of the massive tunnel boring machines have started to arrive next week. Dalawa na po yung tunnel boring machine natin. Pinangalaman po natin ng kaunlaran ang Pearl of the Orient. Ito ho, because nandito na kinukumpong nila yung mga tinatawag na tunnel boring machine, the actual construction of the Metro Manila Subway will actually start and commence before the end of this year. Number 2, the LRT1 Cabita extension delayed for 19 years. Yes, sir, you heard me right, delayed for 19 years. It's finally started full blast construction in May of 2019 Ito po ay inaugurated na po namin bago matapos itong taon na to. The MRT-7 project, which was submitted way back in August of 2007, wherein not a single post was built. 2016 ho, sir, yung MRT-7 is halfway through and will soon be completed. The Mindanao Railway project first conceived in the early 1950s. Yes, you heard me right. The Mindanao project was first conceived in the early 1950s, which did not even have a feasibility study nor contract until 2016, has already been approved by the NEDA board. Nag-uumpisa na ho yung paggawa at pagganap ng lubusan upang bigyan buhay ang tinatawag na Mindanao Railway Project. Asahan po namin na magkaroon ng tinatawag na partial operability bago po sana magtapos ang termino ng ating Pangulo, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Now here is some bit of good news. This year, we will be finally witness the completion and the start operation of two big ticket projects. First, the LRT2 East Extension Project with two additional stations in Marikina and Antipolo is set for inauguration in June. Hangarin po sana dapat namin maumpisa yan ng Abril. Kaya nga po, nagkaroon ng problema at aberya ng konti dito sa tinatawag na COVID. Pagamat meron pong aberya, meron pong formal inauguration at the latest in June of this year. And the second one is the common station. Maalala niyo siguro yung bangayan ng common station noong nag-assume ang Administrasyon Duterte. This was a project that has been delayed for 9 years. This will finally be partially operable by the fourth quarter of 2021. Having said this, it is but necessary to mention that the investment poured by this administration in the railway sector under the Build program is significantly larger than the total railway project investment combined in the last 50 years. Yung nakalimutan ko, 50 years ago, binigyan pansin at ginagawa namin in a period of 5 years. Having seen in this what we are doing at the railways, let's take a look at the aviation sector as a reality number 7. Since 2016 to the present, the DOTR and the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines have completed a total of 121 airport projects. These projects include the long-delayed international airports such as the Bohol Panglao International Airport, the country's first eco airport, which we inaugurated in 2018. The Bicol International Airport, which was delayed for 11 years, will be finally finished this year with a current progress rate of almost 80%. Ang sabi ho nila, matagal at imposible yung Bicol International Airport sa termino ng ating Pangulo. Totoo at real ho yung Bicol International Airport. The construction is targeted to be completed not later than July of this year. We also have completed flagship projects such as the Mactan Cebu International Airport and the one-class passenger terminal building of the Clark International Airport. Yung detalye ho ng Clark International Airport ay pinakita ng ating mahal na Secretary Vince Dizon. Ito po ay joint project ng DCDA, Department of Transportation at LIPA. Ito ho ay mag-i-inaugurate namin sa June. At pagkatapos niyan, yung domestic operation will start in July of this year. Other notable airport projects of the DOTR aviation sector include the development projects in General Santos, in Calibo, in Dirac, in Camiguin, Ormoc, Tacloban, and Calbayog airports to boost air mobility and connectivity in the region. Flashed on the screen, you will appreciate and you will see the improvements that are being undertaken and undergone in the various airports mentioned. Alam niyo ho, naalala ko lang ngayon, yung Ormoc Airport, ladies and gentlemen, nung kami nag-asyong, nakikita nyo dyan, wala nang bubong, wala nang poste. Nasira po ng bagyong Yolanda at hindi man lang nakatikim ng lenhawa. Yan po, inayos po namin. At makikita nyo ho na nasa kanan ninyo yung upgraded Ormoc International Airport. This will show the comparatives and the comparisons, how the Duterte administration manages and do airport projects for the sake of putting up and living up with mobility and connectivity. Listen to this. To promote aviation safety, we have established the Communications, Navigation, Surveillance, Air Traffic Management System, otherwise known as CNS-ATM. The implementation of this project was delayed for 10 years when we assumed. Now, the system is fully operational, bringing the previous total of only 3 radars to 13. Nagdagdag po tayo ng 10 additional radars sa archipelago nang sa ganon ma-assure natin yung tinatawag na safety in the aviation at ma-assure natin yung 100% coverage of Philippine airspace. Ito po, Nxs, ang mga ginagawa at nagawa sa rail at nagawa sa aviation. Sipatin at silipin po natin yung maritime sector. The DOTR and the Philippine Port Authority have been relentless in our pursuit to connect the Philippines, the various islands of the Philippines, and ensure an unimpeded movement of goods and people. Be informed that from 2016 to present, we were already able to complete 426 seaport projects in different parts of the country. These completed projects include the Cagayan de Oro Port Passenger Terminal Building, the biggest port terminal in the country to date. It has the capacity of 3,000 passengers daily. Wala pong ganyan-ganyan nun before the Duterte administration. Ngayon ho, 3,000 passengers is a reality. Some ports have been battered and totally devastated by 2013 calamities and left unrepaired, have likewise underwent major facelift. These are the Ormoc and Tacloban ports, destroyed by Super Typhoon Yolanda, and the Tacbilarang and Maribojoc ports, which sustained significant damages in the aftermath of the Bohol earthquake. I went to Bohol almost 3 weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, where we inaugurated the new terminal building of the Tacbilaran port and inspected the development of the Maribojoc port. Kung titignan niyo ho at nakita ko yung pagbabago ng Maribojoc port noong 2017 at makikita niyo yung pagbabago ngayon, sasabihin niyo, yehey, nabago na yung Maribojoc port. Ito po ay nangyari at nagawa sa pamumuno ng ating mahal na Jay Santiago, na kung saan talagang pinagbubuhos tingin at pansin, sipag at tiyaga ang ginagawa niya sa paggagawa ng ating mga puerto. On the maritime safety, we continue to modernize our country's lighthouses, which serves as the guiding light for seafarers. From only 113 in 2014, the Philippine Coast Guard has hugely decreased its number of operational highlights from 600 as of March 2021. Ngunit ang nagawa ko ng Philippine Coast Guard ay hindi limitado sa tinatawag na lighthouses. Mahaba at matagal ang buhay ang ginawa ng Philippine Coast Guard na kung saan dinamihan niya ho yung personnel Nung nag-assume ko kami, 6,000 to 7,000 lang. Ngayon, as we speak, 16,000 to 17,000 personnel at hangarin pong madagdagan ito. Makikita namin ho natin yung pagbabago ng mga facilities, yung mga speedboat, yung mga rock boats na ginagamit sa rescue operation na kung saan ay talaga namang kapit bigas ang salitang Philippine Coast Guard when meron hong pangangailangan sa relief and rescue operation. Ito ho at Bayan, nakita natin yung mga ginagawa sa apat na sektor sa kagawaran ng transportasyon, sa kalsada, sa riles, sa maritime at sa aviation. Looking back from where we first started, I can say that indeed we have come a long way. But does it mean tapos na ho ito? Does it mean tama na? Hindi ho. The answer is a big no. As we have performed, we will continue to perform and achieve in the last remaining years of the Duterte administration. With barely a year left before we step down, we shall exert all efforts to finish what we have started and fulfill what we have promised and deliver to the Filipino people what we have envisioned. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the only way we can realize the aspiration of our beloved President Mayor Rodrigo Roa Duterte na kung saan, sabi po ng ating mahal na Pangulo as a marching order to me, sabi niya, Art, make the Filipino life comfortable and convenient. As we end our term, we will do no less than make the Filipino life comfortable and convenient. To all of you, good morning.
Thank you very much, Secretary Tugade, for that very thorough update on our land, air, and sea transportation improvements. Now, before we move on to our last speaker for this session, may we remind everyone to please enter your questions in the chat box, and we will have a question and answer portion after. So to wrap up our infrastructure cluster, our last speaker for this session is DICT Secretary Gregorio Honasan II, who will discuss updates on the developments in information and communications technology. Sir Secretary Greg, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Secretary Sunny Dominguez, Secretary Wendell, Secretary Mark, Secretary Art, Secretary Carl Chua, Secretary Vince, Governor Ben Jokno, fellow public servants, partners from the private sector, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good noon to all of you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic early in 2020 brought the world to a standstill. In the Philippines, physical operations of government offices, private organizations, businesses, schools, and transportation were temporarily suspended. And most of us were forced to stay inside our homes as various levels of community quarantine were imposed nationwide to prevent further transmission of the deadly virus. During those early months of the pandemic, when all of us were still grappling with uncertainty, information and communications technology, or ICT, became the country's lifeline, as it provided a platform where all of us could move around freely in the digital landscape, providing continuity to our lives and our society. Indeed, ICT is the new normal in the COVID-19 era. And with this comes the pressing need for the country to undergo digital transformation to better adapt and transition to this new normal. More than a year into the pandemic, the Philippines can see some light at the end of this very dark tunnel as the government rolls out its national immunization program. With this big leap in the country's battle against the pandemic, we must continue to move forward in our digital transformation efforts as we strive to rebuild our digital economy in the post-pandemic era. At the forefront of the digital transformation efforts of the government is the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or your DICT. mandated by Republic Act 10844 to plan, develop, and promote the national ICT development agenda, the department endeavors to advance the digital readiness of the country for the new normal. Even before the pandemic struck the world, we have already recognized that there is a lot to be done to improve the country's state in ICT to be at par with our global neighbors. We have a first-hand experience on how inconvenient slow internet speed and quality can be. Many Filipinos, likewise, lack the necessary knowledge and skills to keep up with the ever-evolving digital world. And development is not inclusive as the focus and investments are directed mostly towards metro cities and highly urbanized areas. The global pandemic has highlighted further challenges such as the highly manual approach to delivering services and the unfamiliarity of the online world as we transition to e-commerce, virtual classes, and the like, making more Filipinos vulnerable to cyber attacks. Lastly, being a country susceptible to natural calamities, it was evident that emergency telecommunications infrastructure and mechanisms were insufficient for times of disaster. As a young agency established in 2016, the DICT has worked diligently to continuously improve the country's ICT state from its creation up to the present day. Adjusting and refocusing our strategies to our current situation, the DICT has adopted the CHIP conceptual framework of the World Bank, as reported in the Philippines Digital Economy Report 2020. The framework covers the acceleration of digital transformation in the country, especially with pressures and challenges brought about by COVID-19. The CHIP conceptual framework is composed of the following key drivers. Connect, which pertains to building the digital infrastructure of the country to establish and strengthen the foundation of digital transformation. Harness, which focuses on devoting resources towards digital education, skills, and jobs to help Filipino educators, learners, and workers advance in the digital economy, making all of us productive. Innovate, which highlights the need for continuous modernization of the government and business sectors for a more efficient, accessible, and digital delivery of services. And protect, which refers to ensuring the protection against and mitigation of possible risks and threats as the country transitions to a digitally enabled economy. In almost 5 years, we have seen a drastic improvement in the condition of the country in terms of its transformation to becoming digital. Your DICT has reached great milestones in this effort. We have improved our internet performance and have started providing connectivity and access to far-flung areas where building infrastructure is a great challenge. The delivery of our government services and the existing government systems were enhanced to become more efficient and resilient in disaster response. In parallel to this, we have also fortified our online security by utilizing cyber technology and by educating Filipinos on how to be responsible digital citizens. Lastly, we have conducted trainings that target to capacitate Filipino people, the Filipino people, to be able to prosper in a digitally driven society. The Connect component of the CHIP framework puts priority in building the ICT infrastructure, the digital highways, roads, and bridges in order for our nation to be linked and empowered. In recent months, we have seen great improvements in the internet performance of the country. For fixed broadband, we are now at 46.25 megabits per second from our previous position of 8.40 megabits per second. Meanwhile, for mobile, our average speed went up to 25.43 Mbps from a mere 7.77 Mbps. Under the Connect key driver, the DICT is implementing national connectivity programs and initiatives that aim to realize a cheap, affordable, and quality internet connectivity across the country. One of the flagship programs of the DICT is the National Broadband Program, or NBP, which acts as the blueprint for the acceleration of the deployment of fiber optic cables and wireless technologies for the overall improvement of the nation's internet connection in terms of speed, reliability, affordability, and accessibility. Since its launch in 2017, the NBP has completed the construction of the internet cable landing stations and the 250-kilometer fiber conduit, which will serve as an ultra-high-speed information highway for a better internet experience. The DICT has also connected more than 800 government agencies nationwide through its government network, or GovNet project, that shall help with the delivery of their frontline services and serve the public better. The DICT has even partnered with the Basis Conversion and Development Authority, or BCDA, for the implementation of the NBP Phase 1, which targets to connect nodes in the national fiber backbone in NCR and other parts of Luzon. The provision of last-mile connectivity and access is the focus of the Free Wi-Fi for All program, pursuant to Republic Act 10929. As of April 16 of this year, we have connected 8,453 live sites covering 1,109 municipalities and 125 cities in 80 provinces nationwide. Since the onset of the pandemic, the DICT has prioritized the provision of internet connectivity in public schools, state universities and colleges, or SUCs, public hospitals, and COVID-19 facilities, most especially in far-flung areas where building of cell towers and deploying internet fiber optic cables is difficult. Through our continuous deployment of the program, we have seen a drastic increase by 500% for the activation of sites in 2020 alone. The DICT recognizes that the existing towers and fibers built are not yet enough to reach the ideal tower to subscriber ratio, which is 1 tower for every 100 to 200 households. To address this concern, the DICT issued the Department Circular number 008, series of 2020, dated 29 May 2020, that provides for the guidelines on shared passive telecommunications tower infrastructure, or PTTI, or most commonly known as the Common Tower Policy. This policy is expected to widen the base of common towers and will accelerate the deployment of internet across the country, as it allows and encourages telcos and internet service providers to share cell towers. According to the data of the National Telecommunications Commission, or your NTC, we have seen the highest number of towers built in 2020 with a total of 4,377 towers versus the combined total number of towers built in 2017 to 2019, which is 3,101. In July 2020, the DICT, along with the other government agencies, issued joint memorandum circular to streamline the requirements and reduce procedural delays in securing necessary permits, licenses, clearances, certificates, and other requirements in constructing towers, reducing processing time from 241 to 16 days, permits from 13 to 8, and documentary requirements from 86 to 35. This will also drastically reduce the standard cost of licensing towers to around 50,000 pesos. The DICT has also launched an online registration portal to digitize the application for independent tower company registration. As of April 21, the DICT was able to issue 15 ITC certificates of registration, which is valid for 5 years. The National Government Data Center, or NGDC project, allows secure, efficient, and strategic integration of ICT systems of different government agencies. Through the NGDC, the DICT is able to provide hosting services to government agencies as well as co-location services. Currently, the DICT has 5 established government data centers and is offering co-location services to 20 agencies, while more than 80 agencies are using DICT's cloud hosting services. In the coming months, the DICT is expecting to operationalize the cable landing stations and to activate 55 nodes in the national fiber backbone. We are also aiming to establish 32 new GovNet sites, which will connect 1,557 agencies and expand the 10 existing GovNet sites, which will provide connectivity to an additional 621 agencies. We are also working towards increasing the number of free Wi-Fi live sites to 67,233 by 2022, connecting more public places, public schools and SUCs, public hospitals and rural health units, among others. To also help with the national COVID-19 vaccination program, the DICT shall provide connectivity to various Bakuna centers through the free Wi-Fi program. To further help with the issue of latency in our internet connection, the DICT plans to establish additional data centers in Visayas and Mindanao, opening more opportunities to bring both international and local content closer to our citizens. The department will be extending the services of NGDC to more national government agencies by providing more cloud hosting services and allowing more NGAs to co-locate in our data center facilities. We are also targeting for the cloud virtualization of our data centers for ease of communication and business continuity. The DICT and the Department of Education have recently signed an agreement to provide short to long-term support, including the allocation of internet bandwidth to schools through the NBP under the Public Education Network, or PEN, initiative of the DICT and the DepEd. Likewise, the DICT is looking into partnering with more local government units across the country for the establishment of the provincial broadband network, which will be linked to the national fiber backbone for middle-mile connectivity in their respective municipalities and localities. Recognizing the need to help Filipino educators, learners, and workers advance in the digital economy in this new normal, the DICT endeavors to invest more in digital education, skills, and jobs under the harness thrust of the CHIP conceptual framework. To bridge the gap in the skills necessary for the Filipino workforce to transition to the demands and needs of the new normal, the DICT is implementing the digital workforce through the ICT Academy program to build their capacity and capability. Currently, the DICT is expanding the ICT Academy, which is envisioned to serve as the initiatives of the department. One of the major courses that is being developed in the academy is the Government Chief Information Officer, or CIO, Master's Program, which seeks to capacitate government personnel with the necessary skills to become more adept in the digital world. We are currently developing the Master's Program in partnership with the UP Technology Management Center, or UPTMC, and we intend to provide scholarships to at least 100 government employees of NGAs and LGUs who would like to be trained to become more proficient IT leaders in public service. Another capacity development activity under the ICT Academy is the IT Business Process Management, or IT-BPM, upskilling and reskilling project. This initiative focuses on the delivery of necessary training and coaching to guide Filipinos to be able to land jobs in the IT-BPM industry. Furthermore, the department is also continuously implementing its Digital Jobs PH project, or previously known as the Rural Impact Sourcing. This initiative targets to help Filipinos in the countryside to become knowledgeable and to learn more about various ICT-related topics and skills, which shall in turn increase their employability. With more than 200 digital jobs PH training conducted, 5,392 individuals were already trained. Among this number, 1,496 were able to acquire online jobs. Likewise, the DICT was able to train more than 1,700 partner micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, under the Digital Jobs PH. Complementing the digital workforce through the ICT Academy program is the upgrading of the Tech for Ed centers into ITU-recognized Digital Transformation Centers, or DTCs. These centers are shared facilities that shall provide learners and workers access to ICT-enabled services for the efficient delivery of training and services in unserved and underserved communities in the countryside. The DTCs aim to elevate and propagate the learning and practical application of ICT courses, standards, and best practices. The DTCs are also envisioned to propagate the establishment of information hubs across the country. The DICT has already established 1,967 operational Tech for Ed centers, while the institution of 11 digital transformation centers is currently ongoing. The digital education program aims to provide the necessary resources for our educators to be able to thrive in the pressures and challenges of the new normal and beyond. We have conducted 74 trainings in which more than 4,000 teachers were trained under the Digital Learners and Teachers Initiative. We have also provided assistance in the deployment of ICT in education modules for teachers. Other programs and initiatives aimed at capacitating the nation's workforce include the development of systems such as the Learning Management System, or LMS, massive ICT open online courses, MOOCs, and Skills Window PH, which will facilitate access to and foster skills development, job matching, and career management. We have also the Digital Cities and Provinces, or DCP program, aimed at determining the industry readiness of cities and provinces by creating and developing ICT hubs for IT BPM companies in identified locations. In June 2020, the DICT launched the 25 cities that shall be the beneficiaries of this program. We have identified strategic locations wherein nearby cities and municipalities may also benefit in this endeavor to encourage business investment in the countryside and to decongest the concentration in the metro. As we continue to adapt to the demands of the new normal and of the ever-evolving digital world, the need to constantly invest in the digital skills of the Filipino is necessary. Under the digital workforce through ICT Academy project, the DICT is envisioning to have its first batch of scholars for the government CIO program in the coming year. We are also planning the expansion of the ICT Academy to be able to offer other ICT-related courses that are highly technical in nature but relevant with the times, including information security, cyber security, and other technologies. We are also looking forward to the rollout of the second phase of the upskilling and reskilling training for the IT BPM workforce and the expansion of the coverage of the Digital Jobs PH training to include persons with disabilities. In the coming months, we are expecting to have 8 new digital transformation centers nationwide and the upgrading of identified Tech for Ed centers to DTCs. For the digital education program, we target to develop more ICT in education modules for teachers and to expand these modules to include cyber safety for both the K-12 learners and educators. We are also looking forward to the partnership development for the Skills Window PH and the content development for the massive ICT open online courses. Under the Digital Cities and Provinces program, the DICT shall develop 31 digital city roadmaps for the identified 25 cities where Metro Manila, Metro Rizal, Laguna Cluster, and Metro Cabita has 3 municipalities each. And the DICT shall also conduct multiple awareness activities that are targeted to promote the Philippine startup ecosystem. Recently, The DICT, DTI, and DOST signed a joint administrative order that institutionalizes the implementation of Republic Act 11337, otherwise known as the Innovative Startup Act. Along with these agencies, the DICT shall provide assistance to emerging startups through the Startup Grant Fund initiative. The Innovate component calls for exploring the potentials of technology in improving government services and the lives of our people. The DICT does this by implementing programs that utilize digital solutions in solving both old and emerging issues. Following President Rodrigo Roas Duterte's directive for the country's immediate transition to e-governance and pursuant to Republic Act 11032, or the Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act of 2018, the DICT continues to implement various initiatives under the digital government umbrella to assist national and local government agencies to streamline their processes by utilizing ICT systems. These include the Integrated Business Processing and Licensing System, or IBPLS project, which offers application systems that help LGUs expedite the processing and issuance of permits and licenses for businesses to be able to operate in their respective localities. Currently, there are 446 LGUs which are utilizing the business permit modules and 16 LGUs using the business permit and certificate of occupancy modules. In addition to the IBPLS, the DICT has developed the Central Business Portal, or CBP, which allows business registrants to apply for the necessary permits and licenses from national government agencies online. Through the CBP, the government can ensure easier monitoring and regulation of business registration traffic. The DICT, in coordination with the Anti-Red Tape Authority, or the ARTA, and other social service agencies, formally launched the Phase 1 of the CBP in January of this year that showcased system enhancements like the applicant dashboard and a unified application form, among others. At present, 16 local government units are onboarded to the CBP. In support of the government's national immunization program, the DICT has developed and is implementing the Vaccine Information Management System, or VIMS, which is the government's main ICT system for the country's vaccination program. The DICT held its pilot implementation in San Juan, LGU, last April 13, and has received positive feedback for speeding up the process of inoculation. Under the EODB program, the IBPLS projects had delivered continuous cloud provisioning to 446 existing LGUs and 368 additional LGUs for the business permit and barangay clearance module, and to 16 LGUs and 80 additional LGUs for building permit and certificates of occupancy. The project also plans to have a pilot implementation of the IBPLS modules in 2022, including sanitary permit, treasury system, and working permit to 80 LGUs. In addition, the Central Business Portal, Philippine Business Data Bank, and the BPLS are targeted to be integrated to the National Government Portal to further improve the interoperability of the EODB's ecosystem. The DICT shall also establish the Virtual National Business One-Stop Shop, or virtual NBOS, to consolidate the process of business application services online in lieu of the originally envisioned physical NBOS sites. In the coming months, the DICT targets to expand the rollout of VIMS to LGUs across the country in support of the national deployment and vaccination program, and to have continuous operational support and system maintenance with the collected data from LGUs and the integration of existing vaccination systems. The final component of the CHIP framework is PROTECT, which involves mitigating risks and threats in the digital economy, using technology and responsive policies, as well as by supplying the people with knowledge and tools to protect themselves. Recognizing the increasing dangers in the digital landscape as we transition to a better normal, the DICT ramps up its cybersecurity initiatives as part of its digital transformation efforts. To protect the country's critical information infrastructure, or CIIs, the DICT issued 8 memorandum and department circulars on the protection of CIIs, government agencies, and individuals. The DICT also connected 10 government agencies to its Security Operations Center, or SUC, which is the heart of the government's cybersecurity defense and support structure. The National Computer Emergency Response Team, or NCERT, of the DICT was able to conduct vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, or VAPT, to 1,580 websites and network systems for 62 client agencies. The Philippine National Public Key Infrastructure, or PNPKI, ensures a secure and reliable online delivery of services between one government agency to another, and between government and the people. It provides a secure digital certificate or signature that can be used in signing various documents and confirming the identity of the signatory. During the onset of the global pandemic, we have released the guidelines on the application and issuance of the PNPKI digital certificates for external clients to accommodate online applications given the set physical restrictions. A total of 18,319 authentication certificates and 18,602 signing certificates have already been issued by your department. Moreover, the DICT, through its Cybersecurity Bureau, also underscores the importance of cyber hygiene awareness, as it has been continuously delivering cyber-related trainings and webinars to the general public. The DICT was able to conduct 29 cybersecurity awareness and information campaign activities, webinars with more than 11,000 participants, with the goal of instilling personal habits to protect oneself from cyber threats. The DICT also recognizes the need for the ICT in improving our capacity for disaster resiliency and response, and increasing the capability of all key public and private units and stakeholders which provide critical emergency services during calamities, especially against the backdrop of a global pandemic. Through the Government Emergency Communication System, Mobile Operations Vehicle for Emergency, or JEX MOVE, which is the subject of the President's marching orders for a backup emergency communication system, we further integrate ICT into risk reduction, resiliency, and disaster response operations. Currently, we have the JEX MOVE prototype deployed in Davao and other strategic areas, with an additional 5 JEX MOVE sets ready to be deployed in 2021. From here on until 2022, the DICT shall endeavor the deployment of the National Cybersecurity Plan 2028 and to continue the monitoring of compliance on policies and regulations on the protection of CIIs, government agencies, and individuals. This is what we call future-proofing. We shall also endeavor to connect 20 more CIIs or agencies to the SOC by 2021 and 30 more by 2022, and continuously train our stakeholders to build their own competent cybersecurity teams of analysts and responders. We shall also develop the telco cyber hygiene, audit and risk assessment, GovCert, and incident response for CII's projects. The DICT and the DepEd are currently planning the issuance of PNPKI signatures to more than 800,000 public school teachers of DepEd who shall aid in the upcoming and national elections. We are also targeting the issuance of 5,000 PNPKI digital certificates for government and the public to transact with each other with trust and security. By 2022, we aim to deploy and operationalize 9 Nxs Move sets and procure 4 more for the benefit of the nearby cities and provinces of our regional cluster offices. We also target to complete the implementation of the Disaster Risk Reduction Management Information System, or DRRMIS, and to strengthen the capacity building activities and training necessary in preparations for disasters. We still have 2 years until the end of the current administration. Within this period, your DICT, invoking public-private partnership, convergence as we adopt the whole-of-nation approach, shall continue to move forward in its digital transformation efforts to help the country during and beyond this pandemic. Patuloy po tayong susulong para isang digital na kinabukasan. And ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, all of these efforts are simply for the benefit of all Filipinos, especially our most precious, strategic, and renewable resource, our next generation of citizens and leaders, our children. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Secretary Greg Honasan, for that updates on the Philippines' readiness in digitalization as we enter the new normal. Now, before we have our lunch break, I know everyone is a bit hungry. We will first have our Q&A. So to introduce our moderator for this session, Mr. George Barcelon is a private representative to the Legislative Economic Development and Advisory Council. He is also the President Emeritus of PCCI and member of the Philippine Business Advisory Council for ASEAN Organization. He is also an independent director of BDO and the Chief Executive Officer of Real Estate, BPO, and Warehouse Development, IT Integrator, Cybersecurity, and Cloud Platform. He will read the questions of the participants and pass them on to the panel. Now may we call on Sir George to please facilitate the Q&A.
Yes, good afternoon to all the viewers. I know this is lunchtime, but I'm glad that many of you are still sticking around, listening to all this interesting discussion. Before I go to the questions and answers for the session 2, I'd like to say a few words thanking Secretary Carlos Dominguez for initiating this Sulong Pilipinas. At the onset, this practice has been started way back in 2016, even before President Rodrigo Roa Duterte was inaugurated. And I can sense that this government is different because although they know that they have the authority, but what's important, they realize that they are accountable to the public. And ever since that, him to be now the Secretary of NEDA, and Governor Ben Diokno, and of course DBM Secretary Wendell Avisado for their good presentation. And now I'm here to moderate for the session 2, wherein you have heard 4 very enlightening and very comprehensive reports. From first, we have Secretary Mark Villar, the Department of Public Works and Highway, and then followed up by Secretary Base Conversion Development Authority President CEO Vince Tison, and the big man himself, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Art Tugade, and the last but not least, regarding the ICT, from Secretary Senator Gregorio Onasan. So I'd like to, actually many of the questions that have been presented are bunched up. So I just like to consolidate some of them so that in the interest of time. The first question is to Secretary Mark Villar. The key, well, the anchor of this administration is really on build, build, build. and you have presented many of the projects today. And there's a question here about are this project planned out with inclusivity in mind? Okay, you have Luzon, Northern Luzon, Mindanao, and Visayas. Do you have the numbers of how many projects are spread out equally so that there will be inclusivity? May I ask Secretary Mark Villar to give us an overview of these questions?
Well, as you can see by the projects, we really try to spread it out across the whole country. And in fact, in terms of resources, if you notice that in areas such as NCR, Greater Metro Manila, the medium that we chose was the PPP format. Therefore, wala masyadong gastos para sa gobyerno. It was even that allowed us to free up resources, the funding for the provinces, which especially the underdeveloped provinces. So if you see some of these projects, there are a lot of flagship projects in many areas that were that didn't have the benefit of these game-changing flagship projects. So it's really, you can really see that there's it's really spread out the number of projects throughout the country. And if you see that in the major, more developed areas, we really chose a different format, which is a lot of them are PPP projects, so that we could free up more resources to develop the rural areas.
Thank you very much. Another follow-up question, also in your department. This question touched on, this came from the Taguig business sector. It comes from talks about the building of better dams and water impounding systems. And I think you have mentioned about the projects that DPWH have in building dams. But since we're talking about water, I'd like to get your comment regarding the pending bills of creating the Department of Water Resources, which as of now, there are so many agencies involved in the water management. Can you share with us your thoughts regarding these pending bills?
Well, on our part, we're just part of, we manage well, not directly, but we do have, our primary concern is more on the flood control aspect of water management. We have agencies under us like MWAS that are more for the water supply. Kami naman, we leave these executive decisions up to the executive department. But in terms of the flood control, we do have a lot of very, very important, very large projects designed to alleviate the flooding. And at the same time, we coordinate with the private sector and others to make sure that if there are opportunities to be had, such as consolidating these projects with water supply, the water supply, and also sanitation needs, we also coordinate. In fact, for local governments, we're willing to help them with their local water supply, and we actively seek local governments who are willing to partner with us to help them solve or find solutions to their water issues.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Last question. This is from Edu Du from PCCI regarding the Bataan Cabita Bridge project. And I'd like to follow up also. There are pending 9 bridges regarding the crossing over of Pasig River. Can you give us an update on that also? Thank you.
Yes, just to give an update. Well, first, the Bataan Cabita Link Bridge, which is already completed the feasibility study, which is already a major accomplishment. But next, now, what we're working on now is the detailed engineering design. Because of the sheer size of the project, of course, the detailed engineering design is a very challenging feat, but we're right in the middle of it now. We expect that perhaps sometime in the next, within this year, we'll see significant accomplishment for the detailed engineering design, which means that it will be ready for procurement. This year, with regards to the Pasig River bridges, we'll be delivering 3 bridges this year, the Pinondo Intramuros, the Estrella Pantaleon, and the PGC Ortega's Link Bridge. So those will be finished. The rest of them, we're procuring them as we speak, and will also be at an advanced stage of construction in the near future.
Thank you very much, Secretary Mark Villar. Now we have the questions to regarding the SDA. President Vince Dizon. The question is from Dean Joel Tan Torres. His question is, the new Clark City can be the location of the National Government Center, similar to other countries which have relocated all of their national offices to one location to be far from the crowded Metro Manila. Is this appropriate to relocate our national government offices en masse rather than piecemeal to the new Clark? Secretary Vince Dizon.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Sir George. Yeah, definitely. And the President already signed the executive order mandating government agencies to begin the process of relocation. But we have to understand that the process of relocation is not easy, and it's not possible to do that just in one go. No, there are a lot of factors that need to be considered. This is why the initial recommendation under that EO is to relocate initially with satellite offices and then slowly building that up towards a full relocation. But I must say, the first agency that relocated to Clark was Secretary Ortega and the Department of Transportation. No, and this is a bold move, unprecedented actually. But for other agencies, it will require a more staggered and phased approach. But the important thing is that is on the way. The President has already mandated this, and it will happen in the next couple of years, and should continue into the next administration.
Thank you, Secretary Vince. Another question is regarding the, well, before that, I'd like to congratulate Secretary Dizon for really a very successful hosting of the SEA Games in 2019. This question is that how will New Clark City attract new sectors, especially the high-value sectors and services related to the fourth IR? Well, basically, this is referring to the knowledge-based sectors to move to New Clark City for their offices. Thank you. Secretary Vince Dizon. I think we have some technical issue.
Sorry about that, yes. I couldn't unmute myself. It begins with infrastructure. No, and I think today our citizens and our business community, especially both local and international, has gotten a glimpse of both the connectivity infrastructure in terms of transportation connectivity that is being built northwards of Metro Manila, but also very important for the fourth IR is the digital connectivity, which was discussed very thoroughly by Secretary. So with these two especially in Clark, then this will provide the impetus for industries and locators, both domestic and international, to begin relocating there.
Thank you. Now I will field the questions, well, which this applies to both you, Secretary Dizon and Secretary Tugade. With all this development, the linkage between Metro Manila and Clark is the train system. And I know this is ongoing, but would like to know the timeline and when this will be operable. The train between Clark and Metro Manila. Thank you. This question can be answered by either one of you, Secretary Art or Secretary Vince.
Okay, Vince, you want to handle or?
Secretary Art, maybe best the Department of Transportation can give the latest update, given that you are the lead agency for this. And thank you very much for making this finally a reality, Sec Art. Thank you.
Number one, I would like to put on record that I have always been a very strong advocate on developing what we call the Central Luzon Corridor. That having been said, I am a very strong advocate in developing the air sector, meaning to say, to develop aviation travel between Clark and all parts, not only of the Philippines, but also of the world. This is being given impetus and underscoring by the fact that the second terminal is scheduled to be operational by next month. Hopefully, after it being operational, after it being inaugurated next month, it will be operational by the month of July. Insofar as the complementary train facilities is concerned, there will be a train development from Tutuban to Bulacan, areas in Bulacan, to areas in Pampanga, and to the Clark International Airport. Partial operability here is targeted to be on 2022. Full operation is targeted to be on 2024. Please note that once this is done, the complementation between air and the rail movements by passenger and cargo, then it puts the predicate to the realization that we will achieve developing Central Luzon as a logistics hub. Don't forget too that adding to the desire to have a logistics hub, complementing this is the port in Subic. Makikita nyo na meron ng puerto, meron na rin paliparan, at meron na rin tren. Partial operability hopefully will be in place by 2022 and full operations hopefully will be completed by 2024.
Thank you very much, Secretary Art. Now, this question is very pertinent to what we're facing now with the COVID pandemic, is the mobility of the working class. And the question is, what are the department's plans and timeline to open, to field more public transportation? And whether there would be a contact tracing system that would be implemented for the commuters in order to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19. Secretary.
Very good point. Number one, you should realize that the situation of pandemic has created a handicap on the transportation system. What does it mean? It created the limited capacity on the transport system. This reality having been said, what is the approach of the Department of Transportation? Naturally, because there is limited capacity in the transport system, there's got to be more trains, more roads, more vehicles, more transportations, more routes, more franchises. Having said this, in addition to this, please realize, because you said addressing the working system, please realize that the Department of Transportation has also given what I call free fare, libreng transport, libreng pamasahe for the frontliners. In addition to that, a few weeks back, we introduced the free pamasahe for APOR and for all those engaged in what we call essential services. Then you will have to combine, you know, the free rides, the more roads, the free trains, more trains, more roads, more buses. You'll have to combine this in order to accelerate and add to the already limited transportation facility, more especially for the working class. Now, let me give you some details because you asked for a timetable. As of 12 April 2021, the percentage of our operational PUBs in Metro Manila is already at 80%. These figures equate to 99,000 units available in 727 routes. For the nationwide figures as of April 23, we have already opened 234,939 PUB units in 5,803 routes. On April 13, the LTFRB opened 60 more traditional jeepney routes with 2,000 operating units in Metro Manila. This increased the total number of traditional jeepney routes in the NCR to 414 and the number of authorized units to 37,000. On April 15, the LTFRB has opened additional 195 provincial bus routes with more than 2,600 provincial bus units traversing Metro Manila, subject to the requirements of the local government. Please understand that insofar as the provincial routes is concerned, it is not just a matter for us opening routes or providing the transport facilities. We have to put into the equation the approval, conformity, and consent of the local government because of the pandemic. They require, some local government requires, make requirements more than the others, some requires less than the others. But the reality is we have to communicate and coordinate with the local government. This is what we are doing insofar as addressing the issue of limited capacity at times of pandemic in relation to the working class.
Thank you very much, Secretary Art. Now, I have the last questions to be fielded to DICT Secretary Senator Gregorio Onasan. And thank you very much, Secretary Onasan, for briefing us a very comprehensive programs of DICT, which really covers a lot of grounds, also considering that the education now is even relying even more heavily on the telecom system. The question is, with the third player in the telecom, although the service of the two players have improved and they're doing a lot, as per you, as what you have mentioned about the additional antenna and common antenna, that's really speed up the broadband. But we still have to be competitive on our IT telecom services. We are one of the highest subscription rate compared to the other ASEAN countries. So this is something that maybe Secretary can enlighten us. And the importance of having this broaden our DICT system in different localities, because now the smart cities is getting traction, and the smart city system is very important for the ease of doing business on licenses and compliance, and at the same time security. So Secretary, may you enlighten us on this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir George. Actually, your preparatory statements that led to the question reflects the marching orders of our President to your DICT. Sabi po ni Presidente sa amin, Sir George, ladies and gentlemen, your mission as a technical support department is connectivity. From a purely policy viewpoint, you must connect government to other governments, domestic and global, connect government to business to enhance economic activity, government to its citizens, and everybody to each other. And you must do this faster, cheaper, if not free, and in a more secure manner. Pero with your permission, Sir George, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to deal with the policy issues. I agree from education, which is probably one of the main solutions to our developmental problems. What we want to introduce, considering that we have about 2 years to go under the present dispensation, under the leadership of our President, we want to reintroduce an element of continuity, sustainability, and some degree of policy predictability. We don't want to get stuck into this situation where are perpetually into medium-term development planning. That's part of our mission. Kung ang mission po ng our other line agencies, we have heard the very comprehensive reports of the other departments, is to build. The mission of your DICT is to connect, and connect. And that is precisely what we are trying to do. Second point po, the pandemic has developed for us an opportunity, something like a blessing in disguise. It has forced us to look at problems that existed before the pandemic, which is basically telecommunications. Historically, sir, the telecommunications industry and our initiatives for connectivity, using ICT as a driving force, was private sector-led. It is not the fault of the telcos. The only intervention of government was the allocation of spectrum or frequencies. We are trying to rationalize that with a spectrum management policy. Ang nangyari po kasi is when we allocated the spectrum, the frequencies, ang ginawa ng players, not their fault, is to use some of them, to keep some of them, and unfortunately to sell some of them. What we want to do is recover this because the frequencies are state property. It is the property of the Filipino people. Now, if we force the issue, the NTC, the National Telecommunications Commission, is a quasi-judicial body. They will take us to court. And before this is resolved, it might take about 3 to 5 presidents. So what we need now, and I think the present government has the temperament for that. I have witnessed in my lifetime other teams in other and previous administrations. This is, I'm not patting ourselves on the back. No? This is the most cohesive team I have ever seen and have been privileged to be a part of. So that is what we are trying to do. Now, our mission has not changed. It is still connectivity. And being a technical support department, we will continue to do so. And our mantra, especially the interagency task force that is focusing on the pandemic issue, it will be science-based and data-driven. Unfortunately, Sir George, I think you are personally a witness to this. For every issue, we have a surplus of experts. We have a surplus of experts, especially with the advent of social media. For every position, on something as technical as public health, which we are trying to balance or rebalance with the economic issues, not to mention the political and the social issues, idagdag mo pa yung security issues. We have an interesting situation which brings us to the crux of the matter. We do not know when the pandemic will end. So this is all about crisis management at individual, family, community, domestic, and global level. But let me try to end on a high note. We have problems, definitely, which we have to confront as a people. And maybe connectivity through ICT, technology, is part of the solution. We will complement the efforts of our line departments. But I think it is also proper and prudent for us to count our blessings. If you, just by scanning the global news, which we listen to and watch almost on a daily basis, and we find out, we discover what is happening in other parts of the world, I think we must continue to have faith and believe that the Philippines is a blessed nation. You look at the map, we can be the digital hub of not only the Pacific area, but we can be the digital hub of the world. And let me assure our people and you that your DICT will continue with its best lights to perform its function and try to accomplish this technical support mission. Salamat po. Sorry for that long answer.
Thank you, Secretary, for enlightening us. I'd just like to add to commend you on your vision and your leadership in implementing the cybersecurity project in the Philippines. I know we still have some way to go, but it's a start, and it started in very firm footing, which is very important considering that the data privacy, both for commercial and individual, is very pertinent things to discuss under the ICT landscape. So with that, maraming salamat po sa mga viewers and all the our secretaries for enlightening us in various topics of infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir George Barcelon, for moderating our infrastructure cluster session, and thank you to all our department secretaries of the infrastructure cluster. Now, we are running a bit late, but our discussions have been very thorough. So we will, at this point, we will have a break. We'll be back at around 1:45. So we encourage everyone to participate in the virtual plenary when we come back, and we invite all our media partners to stay in your room since we will also have a simultaneous press con by 1:45. So as of now, everyone, I hope you enjoy your lunch, and see you at 1:45. Thank you.
We have delivered solidly on some of the key recommendations from Sulong workshops in 2016 and 2017. We are eager to receive your actionable recommendations and will thoroughly study and act on them with as much seriousness as we have done in the past.
This is actually great because especially for us, we're just individuals, but we actually really need and want to tap into informations like this, where we can collaborate with government organizations, what they are doing already, and what we can do as part of the citizen of the Philippines, right?
Pretty much taken aback actually, because for the first time, it's government's reaching out. You know, it's not common for government to reach out, especially here in the regions, even in Visayas and Mindanao.
Kasi marami akong natutunan, marami akong nalalaman regarding sa mga programa ng ating gobyerno, particularly sa Duterte administration. So, ang laking tulong niya, lalong-lalo na sa mga MSME katulad ko.